Chapter 394. A hot pot was placed on the table in the room. As the temperature of the water rose, the soup in the hot pot began to boil, and the bottom of the pot came out from time to time. Upon seeing this, Runbachian quickly placed the meat and wild vegetables in the pot, and the aroma immediately came out. When they were waiting for the hot pot soup to boil, the three of them stared at each other, and didn't have much to say. Now that the soup was boiling, the deadlock was broken. Runbachian the Empress and Hongwu, who had mastered the art of changing faces. When facing the Empress, it was like a gentle breeze, but when looking at Runbachian, it was as cold as ice. The instantaneous change in expression was breathtaking. Even Runbachian wanted to ask Hongwu if he was eating from him or stealing from him. Why did he have such a cold face when he saw me? With such a person present, Runbachian's mood immediately turned sour. The Empress had always been cold. If Runbachian didn't speak, she wouldn't either. Hongwu stood there like a light bulb. Now that the hot pot was ready, the atmosphere became more lively as Runbachian started to move. The Empress stared at the meat floating in the hot pot and focused all her attention on it. "Your Majesty!" Runbachian dipped the meat and placed it on the Empress's plate before disappearing in an instant. The Empress had been craving food these days. Runbachian poured wine for the Empress before pouring wine for himself. "I wish your Majesty prosperity in martial arts." Runbachian raised his cup and toasted. The Empress downed the wine in one gulp. As the wine entered her stomach, her eyes became brighter. "I congratulate your Majesty for killing Lu Qi and intimidating Great Xia." Runbachian toasted again. Although Runbachian said it casually, it was the truth. In the past 6 months, the Empress had killed the 5th most powerful expert in the world, Hua Sanlu, the Zhumu elders and Lu Qi, who was originally the 8th most powerful expert in the world, but rose to the 7th most powerful expert because of the Empress. The news of the defeat of Great Xia and the loss of 500,000 soldiers spread throughout Great Xia. The Empress's reputation for killing was now deeply rooted in the hearts of Great Xia. Countless warriors and scholars were discussing Dayo's Qi Zixiao in the streets, alleys and taverns. All of them were amazed. One had to know that 3 years ago, because the Empress was young and didn't have many battles with experts, she was ranked among the top 10 in the world. Many people had their doubts. As a result, there were always people challenging the Empress for the next 2 years. Even though none of the challengers survived, the Empress still hadn't fought against a top-notch expert. It was only in the past 6 months that he had shaken the world 3 times in succession. Outside of Dayo, his reputation had already overshadowed that of Hongwu, who had guarded the borders for decades. After all, this kind of top-notch expert, and a young woman at that, with peerless beauty, would attract even more attention. Unfortunately, I heard that she raised a gigolo. This 3rd cup. Even though I didn't do anything, I still want to thank myself for the hard work. Runbachian said sincerely after thinking for a while. When Hongwu heard this, his beard stood up and he almost smashed the bowl on Runbachian's face. This guy's shameless demeanor was even worse than that bastard Tongjinya when he was young. If he had known that this person was like this, he would have risked his life to stop Her Majesty from choosing him as her husband. Upon hearing this, the Empress's eyes curved into crescents. She looked at Runbachian with her clear eyes and asked, "Do you want me to pour you some wine?" "I'll do it myself. I'll do it myself." Runbachian chuckled and finished the wine. "I salute the great general for his hard work," the Empress said to Hongwu while fiddling with the wine cup. "Thank you, Your Majesty. This is my duty." Hongwu held the cup with both hands and didn't forget to glare at Runbachian. In any case, the room was livelier than before. It was much better than before. "Your Majesty, what should we do next?" Runbachian raised his cup and asked. "What do you mean?" The Empress's eyes flickered as she didn't quite understand what he meant. Great Xia came to fight and retreated in defeat. "What's next?" Runbachian asked. "The commoners who escaped into the city should return to their villages and reorganize their fields. However, some of the villages have been burned down, and the crops for this season have been destroyed. I'm afraid that the people's livelihood will be difficult for the next 2 seasons, so their taxes should be reduced," Hongwu said. This was a major issue in his eyes. The cities that have been destroyed also need to be rebuilt. What's next? Rinpoche continued to ask. Principal Run, if you have something to say, just say it. Hongwu said. What I mean is, shouldn't we ask Great Xia for compensation for their defeat? Rinpoche asked. Compensation for defeat? Hongwu and the Empress looked at him. This term had never been used in this world before. Rinpoche saw that they didn't understand and explained. They can't just come and fight as they please and retreat after losing, right? We have suffered so many casualties, so 100 taels of silver for each man will expert isn't too much, right? Don't they have to compensate for the funeral expenses? There were at least 100,000 casualties, which would be 10 million taels of silver. Also, the families of those who died and were injured also need to be compensated, right? One had to know that they had lost their loved ones because of Great Xia's atrocities. Even though money couldn't make up for their psychological trauma, not paying them was absolutely unacceptable. In addition, Your Majesty, you haven't been eating or sleeping well these days, and you've even lost half a kilogram. This should be compensated, right? Also, we spent a lot of manpower and material resources to build those cities, but they were destroyed by Great Xia's invasion. This matter must be solved with money. Also, they cut down so many of our trees to attack the cities. It takes 10 years to grow trees, and 100 years to nurture people. How many years will it take for those trees to grow again? We still have to pay for the things we buy, and they have to compensate for the trees that they robbed. Also, they left behind so much rubbish when they retreated. I don't know how much manpower and material resources will be needed to clean up this rubbish. Even though it's inevitable that there will be casualties during a battle, these are all caused by Great Xia. No matter how you look at it, they should be the ones to compensate. This is the compensation, and there's also the compensation for defeat. They can't just fight whenever they want, right? They fought and lost, so they have to compensate. Rinpoche counted with his fingers for the two of them. Finally, they robbed me of 5 million taels of silver. You have to return this to me, right? Hongwu and the Empress's faces were bright and full of expression. Rinpoche's words were an eye-opener for them as they had never heard of compensation for defeat. Also, what's with the last 5 million taels of silver? When were you robbed of 5 million taels of silver? How could Xia Bailong possibly agree to these demands? Hongwu was flabbergasted at first, and then he said coldly, if he doesn't want to pay, he can just go and get it himself. I heard that they already have 180,000 soldiers at the border. It's difficult to even guard the border. If an army were to enter the hinterland of Great Xia, they wouldn't be able to do anything, right? Their new soldiers can't be trained in a few months. Even if they were to transfer troops from other places, it wouldn't be possible in a short period of time. With this amount of time, we can already do a lot of things. After robbing them, we can spread the word that the Emperor of Great Xia refused to compensate us for our losses, and that he was the one who invaded us first. However, he doesn't want to bear the consequences and doesn't care about the civilians in those cities. I'm afraid that it will backfire. Those civilians will still hate us, Hongwu said after thinking seriously. Even though he didn't like Rinpoche, he would temporarily put aside his prejudice when it came to proper business. He was still a little tempted to rob them. After all, no one would be able to take it lying down after being beaten up for no reason. Needless to say, he was a veteran at the border who had been in the army for decades. The human heart is the most unpredictable thing. It's not uncommon for a person to hate his protector because his protector didn't protect him well, causing him to be hurt by others. Rinpoche shook his head. Moreover, they don't necessarily like us now. Hongwu agreed with Rinpoche's last sentence. The problem now is that there's still the Yun nation. Hongwu frowned. At present, the Protectorate of the Northeast was still at war with the Yun nation, and the Protectorate of the North had just ended its war with Great Xia. If they were to start a war with Great Xia now, they would probably fall into a quagmire again. The first batch of 20,000 new soldiers will be ready in 2 months. If it's just the Yun nation, we won't be able to cause much trouble in 2 months. On the other hand, Great Xia is probably licking its wounds and recuperating. Who knows when they will attack us again? In particular, when we are at war with the Yun nation, they are silently sharpening their claws. Instead of this, We might as well give them some trouble first. At least before we deal with the Yun nation, they won't be able to care about us, Renbachian said. It won't take long to deal with the Yun nation, Hongwu said. He wanted to seek stability and deal with the Yun nation first before dealing with Great Xia. The Yun nation was much easier to deal with than Great Xia. It's easy to repel the Yun nation, but it won't be easy to occupy them in a short period of time, Renbachian said. Hongwu was shocked to hear this and looked at the Empress. The Empress nodded her head slightly, acknowledging Renbachian's words. Even though the Yun nation is smaller than Dayo, it has a large population and the situation is complicated. If we want to occupy the Yun nation, we will need to maintain a large number of troops. Even though there are advantages to occupying the Yun nation, there are also many disadvantages. Just like in the south, those people are always dishonest. They occupy a large piece of land, and even implicate an entire protectorate. Hongwu frowned. He didn't know when the Empress and Renbachian came up with this idea, but it would be difficult for Dayo to annex the Yun nation. If the South and the Yun nation were to join forces, it would probably involve a lot of energy. In his opinion, the disadvantages outweighed the advantages. Regarding this idea, his first reaction was to oppose it. After all, apart from the lack of salt and iron, Dayo was still doing well in other aspects. Furthermore, the salt and iron issues had already been resolved. There was no need to take the risk of annexing the Yun nation and spending a lot of energy to govern it. If things went wrong, they might end up in a quagmire. One had to know that the Yun nation wasn't a small country. Its population was even larger than Dayo's. At present, Dayo couldn't find that many officials that could be used after occupying the Yun nation. However, the Yun nation has what we need the most, Renbachian summarized. Regardless of whether it was salt, iron, minerals, or population, Dayo needed them in all aspects. If Dayo wanted to develop quickly, the various products of the Yun nation would be very important. Furthermore, I already have some ideas on how to govern the Yun nation, Renbachian said. Hongwu glanced at him. He was doubtful of his words. This matter is of great importance. Your Majesty, you have to reconsider. Hongwu cupped his hands. I have made up my mind, the Empress said faintly. After going to Earth, she realized how barren Dayo was. Therefore, it was necessary to obtain a land like the Yun nation that was rich in mineral resources. Great General, you don't have to worry too much. When the time comes, we can look at the situation. If things don't work out, we can bring back a lot of resources from the Yun nation, Renbachian added. Hearing this, Hongwu was finally relieved, but his eyebrows were still knitted together. War wasn't child's play. Occupying such a large country and incorporating it into one's territory wasn't child's play either. Chapter 395. Hongwu left with a frown. He still had doubts about swallowing the Yun nation. It wasn't difficult to conquer the Yun nation. The problem was that it would easily drag Dayo into a quagmire. Those experts who stayed out of the war wouldn't sit idly by either. If they wanted to stabilize the situation in the Yun nation, they needed a lot of troops. However, there was one thing that he immediately did. The next morning, he sent a letter to Tiesua Pass and handed it over to the current commander of Great Xia, Guide General Ziyi. At noon, Ziyi opened the letter that was delivered to him in his residence. He saw that he looked like a chicken that had crawled out of its claw. After carefully reading the letter, he saw that it was a list of compensation that Great Xia had to pay. This included various funeral expenses, expenses for repairing the city walls, compensation for mental damage. Finally, there was the 5 million taels of silver that was robbed by the Jirua city guards. In total, there was a total of 105 million taels of silver, which was the annual income of Great Xia's treasury. Ziyi was stunned. After reading it carefully, he felt that he had seen wrongly. After reading it 3 times and confirming that he hadn't seen wrongly, he tore the letter into pieces. At the same time he said coldly, "Could it be that they are crazy?" Then he ordered, "Chase them out." Compensation? What a joke. There had never been such a thing. In the evening, Hongwu received the report and reported it to the Empress. Just as we expected, the commander of Great Xia has chased the messenger back, Hongwu said. Just as I said before, Go and get it yourself, the Empress said faintly. Your Majesty, who should we send? Hongwu asked. One had to know that the winged cavalry wouldn't be enough to transport the goods back to Great Xia. Furthermore, the winged cavalry lacked top-notch experts. The strongest was the winged cavalry's protector general, who was equivalent to a spirit wheel expert. Let Li Qianqiu go, the Empress said after some thought. With Li Qianqiu's strength, as long as he didn't encounter a top-notch expert, there shouldn't be any problems. The next day, the Empress Hongwu and Ren Baqian circled an area in Hongwu's study. Then, the Empress used the radio to call for Li Qianqiu. 2 days later, Li Qianqiu, who was resting near Liao City, arrived at Ping City with 6,000 soldiers from the protectorate of the center. The three of them spent the entire afternoon researching in Hongwu's study. The next day, Li Qianqiu led the winged cavalry, 3,000 soldiers, all the fork-horned cows in Ping City that could be used as mounts, and a large number of water buffaloes that could be used as rations. They headed straight for the west and prepared to cross the Liaoning mountain range and head toward Great Xia. Along with them were the 1,000 grenades that Ren Baqian had prepared. This thing would be of great use in the face of the Great Xia military formation. To disrupt the enemy's formation, 1,000 pills were enough for 3 battles. It was more than enough. Both sides had radios that could contact each other at any time. If they wanted to return, Hongwu could send troops to attack Tiesua Pass to reinforce them. As for the rest, it all depended on Li Qianqiu. One day after Li Qianqiu left, Ren Baqian said to the Empress, Your Majesty, it's time for us to return. Li Qianqiu's return trip would take at least a month. The Empress had been away from Lan City for a long time, and it was time for her to return. We'll set off tomorrow. The Empress nodded. After saying this, the Empress glanced at Ren Baqian again. The meaning behind her words was very clear. Where was the rainbow cloud that he mentioned? Your Majesty, the cloud is still on its way. Why don't we wait for another 3 days? Ren Baqian hurriedly suggested. Previously, when he came back, he only brought the grenades and some equipment. There was still one extremely important thing that he didn't get. In that case, let's wait for another 3 days, the Empress said indifferently. Although she was already tired of staying in Ping City, there was no harm in waiting for another 3 days. After another day, Ren Baqian and the Empress returned to Earth together. It had been more than 2 months since the start of the war. More than half a year had passed on Earth. The last time the Empress was here, it was still autumn. Now it was already the end of spring and the beginning of summer. The weather was just right. The first thing that came into the Empress's sight was an unfamiliar room. It was much bigger than the previous house. On one side, there was a floor-to-ceiling window. Bright and beautiful sunlight shone in through the window. Standing at the Empress's position, she could see the lush greenery outside the window. In the past, there were only tall buildings outside the window, but now they were gone. Your Majesty, this is our new house, Ren Baqian said. Oh, the Empress responded faintly. She wasn't interested in this. Your Majesty, follow me. You will definitely like it. Ren Baqian held the Empress's hand. It was very soft and warm. He hadn't held her hand like this for a long time, and it made him a little excited. After opening the door, there was a very spacious corridor. At the end of the corridor was a table and a pot of flowers. Above it was a window. Diagonally across from Ren Baqian's room was the room reserved for the Empress. It was 3 times the size of the previous room. There was a huge mirror and a row of wardrobes that barely contained the Empress's clothes. Next to the window was a princess bed. Your Majesty, this is your room, Ren Baqian introduced. The Empress tilted her head. In the previous house, she and Ren Baqian had 2 floors. Now, they were diagonally across from each other. I have brought all your clothes over. Ren Baqian opened the wardrobe and revealed a sea of red. Almost all of them were red dresses. The Empress was a little happy to see these dresses. Although she hadn't worn most of these dresses, women didn't buy clothes just to wear them. Seeing them placed there would make people happy. Next is this. Ren Baqian opened another door. The room was surrounded by shelves with a dazzling array of snacks. Most of the things that the Empress liked to eat could be found here. In the middle of the room were 3 freezers that were filled with ice cream. Upon seeing this room, The Empress shook off Rinpoche's hand and walked in alone. She took out a chocolate cake, opened it, and put it in her mouth. Then she walked around the room. She had a faint smile on her face. Although she felt that this place was very good and liked it, it didn't make her as happy as the candy tree. Overall, she was still very satisfied. Rinpoche leaned against the wall and watched the Empress walk around the room with a smile on his face. Next is the next floor. Rinpoche and the Empress went to the first floor. The living room was very big, but they didn't pay much attention to it. Rinpoche directly pushed open a door, and what was reflected in the room was a broken light. The room was very big, even bigger than the 2 bedrooms upstairs combined. It was covered with colorful tiles, and was filled with a Mediterranean style. In the middle was a swimming pool that was about 100 square meters. The water inside was so clear that the bottom could be seen. Next to the pool were 3 reclining chairs and a side table. Rinpoche eagerly introduced, "Your Majesty, you can swim here in the future. Just think about it, swimming here, soaking in the cool water while I serve tea and pour wine for His Majesty. It's so fascinating. I've even prepared a swimsuit for His Majesty. Do you want to give it a try?" "You seem to want me to give it a try?" The Empress turned to look at him. Chapter 396. Your Majesty, there are no outsiders here. It will be cool to soak in the water. The Empress looked at him, stretched out her hand, and sent him flying into the pool. "I don't feel hot in this weather. You should go down by yourself," the Empress said faintly, and went upstairs to change her clothes. She was well aware of Rinpoche's intentions. It wasn't like she hadn't been to the seaside before, but she didn't really care and was just a little shy. Plop. Rinpoche began to panic when he fell into the water. He didn't know how to swim. Gulp, gulp, gulp. He gulped down large mouthfuls of water, and finally stabilized himself. When he stood up, he realized that the water was only slightly above his chest. After all, the depth of this pool was only about 1.4 meters. After climbing out of the pool, Rinpoche lay on the edge of the pool and spat out water like a fountain. He was finally alive. He thought that he would have to learn how to swim sooner or later. It would be a tragedy if a dignified man well expert like him drowned in a pool that was 1.4 meters deep. He took a towel from the side and wiped his head before returning to his room to change his clothes. When he came out, he heard the sound of the television downstairs. When he went downstairs, he found the Empress curled up on the sofa eating ice cream. "Do you want to go out for a walk?" Rinpoche asked as he sat beside her. "You have worked hard these days." "Okay." The Empress nodded cheerfully. These days in Ping City were really boring, and it was good to go out for a walk. As he drove down the mountain, Rinpoche casually talked about what happened a few days ago and said, "There seems to be something disturbing me in my mind. I always want to kill that person. Also, all kinds of thoughts come out. I don't know if there is a problem with the metal chain or something else affecting me." Rinpoche didn't say that Qi Jieyu looked exactly like the Empress. He just wanted to hear her opinion. Although the Aboriginals didn't cultivate their minds, the Empress was more or less able to understand them with her strength. The metal chain emerged from Rinpoche's head. Did someone shout at it just now? The Empress grabbed the metal chain that had just emerged from Rinpoche's head and tried to twist it into an S shape. She carefully sensed it and said doubtfully, "This thing shouldn't affect you. Furthermore, there's nothing else in your soul see other than this metal chain." The Empress fiddled with the metal chain in her hand and twirled it around her palm a few times. The metal chain couldn't escape even if it wanted to. "It turns out that Your Majesty is also proficient in this area." After hearing what the Empress said, Rinpoche felt that she seemed to know more than he thought. "I don't know much about it, but there's a sliver of my soul in your body. If something happens, I will be able to sense it," the Empress said faintly. Upon hearing this, Rinpoche subconsciously stepped on the accelerator. The car behind him almost hit Rinpoche, and the driver of the car was so angry that he pressed on the horn and cursed loudly. "Part of my body." Rinpoche was dumbfounded. "At that time, I thought that if you let me down, you would not be able to escape death no matter where you went," the Empress said faintly. "If you didn't betray me and were killed by someone else, This wisp of soul will be able to wrap around that person's body. I will be able to find him and kill him no matter where he goes. Rinpoche widened his eyes. Damn, when did this happen? He had such a dangerous thing on him? Usually it doesn't affect you. I did it a long time ago. The Empress turned her head and didn't look at him. Rinpoche opened his mouth and didn't know what to say. Could it be that the Empress was afraid that he would run away in the past? Otherwise, why would she do this? If he was in Lan City, the Empress could kill him with one finger. Why would I let you down? Rinpoche said softly. Being able to know you was arranged by God. God is the most powerful. Moreover, you are the only treasure in the world. To be able to be with you, I have nothing else to ask for in this life. The Empress's ears felt warm and she was elated. Her fingers subconsciously poked at the car door, from the outside. One could only see the door being poked open like a piece of paper. Then another finger poked out. The driver of the car beside them was stunned. Rinpoche continued to drive forward and asked, "Is it easy to split your soul? Doesn't it affect you?" "It's very painful," the Empress said faintly. For her to say that it was painful, it was indeed very painful. It was as if she was being torn apart. However, she didn't expect it to be so painful. Otherwise, she probably would have hesitated. This was a secret technique passed down in the Aboriginal tribes. Only the supreme geniuses could do it, but it could only be done once. Only when one reached longevity heaven could they separate their soul for the second time. However, every time they split their soul, they would experience the pain of their body being torn apart. As a result, very few people used this technique. At this point, Rinpoche already knew why he wanted to kill Chi Jiayu when he saw her. As for why he had those thoughts, it was probably because he was affected by that split soul. It was just like when he saw the seventh prince. When this split soul saw Chi Jiayu, it also had the same reaction. According to what he thought, this was, after all, a split soul and was different from the real person. Therefore, when the killing intent arose, it also evoked all kinds of thoughts. Rinpoche didn't mention this matter again. He really liked the Empress. Having such a woman to spend a lifetime with was really enough for him. At this point, he knew that he wouldn't do anything to let the Empress down and naturally didn't care about this split soul. Can you sense what the split soul sees? Rinpoche suddenly remembered something. I can't. Since this split soul has been separated, I can only sense its location at most. Oh. Rinpoche heaved a sigh of relief. It was fine as long as he could retain his privacy. What if he went to a spa in the future? If the Empress peeped at him from the side, he would probably be hung on the city wall and turned into bacon when he returned. As for the matter with Chi Jiayu, he put it aside as he hadn't decided what to do. Although he knew that he was affected by the split soul of the Empress, the influence was already there. That kind of thought had appeared in his mind and left a trace. Therefore, he was still somewhat concerned about Chi Jiayu. However, this matter would be considered later. For the next 2 days, the two of them had nothing to do and strolled around Shanghai, looking at the dresses and shoes in the various shops. For the Empress, buying dresses had always been her hobby. 3 days later, the two of them returned to Dayo with a pile of white boxes. The next day, early in the morning, the sky was still bright. The road from the entrance of Hong Wu's residence all the way to Ping City's southern gate was covered in layers of white fog. Walking on it was like walking on clouds. It was a road that was covered with mist. Everyone who woke up early and saw this scene was surprised. They didn't know what was going on, but both sides of the road were blocked by people who didn't allow anyone to walk on it. Some people tried to fish at the edge of the road, but they couldn't find anything. The dense mist on the ground didn't have any shape at all. After taking a closer look, they noticed that there were a few burly men on both sides of the road, who were holding a strange object. The mist was coming from the front of this strange object. As the strange object emitted colorful rays of light, the mist became colorful as well. Only this rainbow mist road is worthy of your majesty. Rinpoche stood in front of Hong Wu's residence, bowed slightly, and pointed his arm outside. At this moment, looking from the inside, the ground outside was covered with a layer of colorful clouds. The mist slowly rose and dissipated, making it look like a fairyland. The Empress's eyes lit up as she looked at everything outside. Although she had thought about what the rainbow clouds that Rinpoche mentioned looked like, she didn't expect it to be like this. It was like a road paved with clouds. There wasn't a woman who wouldn't be affected by such a scene. It was a huge surprise. Rinpoche took a step forward, held the Empress's fingertips and led her out. When they stepped into the mist, they could feel that the temperature here was much colder than other places. However, it felt more real than not feeling anything. Rinpoche led the Empress on this mist road, and the two of them walked toward the south gate. After the two of them left, the people at the back turned off the smoke mechanism. The mist on the ground soon began to dissipate, revealing the flagstone road below. From afar, it looked like a road made of clouds was prepared for the two of them. As the two of them moved forward, the mist behind them began to dissipate, and the road shortened. Quickly come out and see the deities. What deities? Where are the deities? Many people who were affected by the noise outside opened their windows and looked out. When they saw the road paved with mist and the two people on it, they were immediately speechless. Along the way, the Water Empress's eyes were sparkling and filled with surprise. She also had a smile on her face. When she walked to the city gate and looked back, the mist behind her had already begun to dissipate. Hongwu and the others were also rushing over. Rinpoche leaned his head over and gently pecked the Empress's red lips. The Empress's eyes sparkled as she looked straight at him. There was something surging in her eyes. It was rare that she didn't dodge. The soft touch and faint sweetness made Rinpoche's heart ripple. It was a pity that the time and place weren't right. Otherwise, Rinpoche would really like to continue like this. At the city gate, a man and a woman were kissing in the mist, and they immediately pulled back. The surrounding guards all received tons of damage and looked up at the sky. Chapter 397. Wu Xingho is dead? Great Xia has retreated? Outside Sanchi City, in a huge tent in the Yun Nation's military camp, a middle-aged man cried out after reading the contents of the letter in his hand. This man was the commander of the Yun Nation's Western Army, Zhu Wuzhen. The Yun Nation only received the news half a month after Great Xia retreated. When Wu Xingho died, the Yun Nation didn't receive the news yet. However, Great Xia's retreat couldn't be kept a secret. Zhu Wuzhen's expression was uncertain. Now that Great Xia had retreated, it would be troublesome for the Yun Nation to send out their troops. If the Yun Nation was of one mind and deployed their elite soldiers, Daya would still stand a chance against them given the current situation. However, those people in the imperial court made him feel a chill just thinking about it. Without the skin, where would the hair attach to? They understood this simple logic. However, to them, internal strife and their own calculations were obviously more important than external threats. Previously, it was still alright when Great Xia distracted Dayo. Now that Great Xia was gone, he also had the idea of retreating. Then he saw the second letter, and his expression changed drastically. First he was enraged, and he slammed his palm on the table. A palm-shaped hole appeared on the table, and the place where his palm had been had turned into wood dust. After a while his anger dissipated, and he smiled bitterly. In such a situation, they actually told him that they couldn't retreat. Wasn't this clearly making Great Xia a scapegoat? He wondered which official in the imperial court had received a lot of money from Great Xia to make such a decision. Did they really think that without Great Xia, the 180,000 soldiers from the Western Army and those miscellaneous soldiers could stop Dayo? What a joke! His only hope was that the Chun nation would send out their troops as soon as possible. Rinpoche and the Empress had just arrived in Liao City when it started to rain. It continued to rain for 3 days. During these 3 days, Rinpoche and the Empress sat in the room, each holding a small wine glass and staring blankly. Is the rainy season here? Rinpoche asked while playing with the wine glass in his hand. Almost, the Empress replied casually. According to the seasons, it would be the rainy season from now until September, and the rest of the time would be the dry season. There were no 4 seasons. In Dayo, there were only 2 seasons, the rainy season and the dry season. Liao City was located in the north, so the rainy season came slightly later. Rinpoche looked at the drizzle outside the window and racked his brains to come up with a poem. During the yellow plum blossom season, every house is raining. Not bad. The Water Empress said calmly. She didn't know much about poetry, but it sounded pretty good. There are better ones. Renbaqian immediately laughed. Tell me about it. The Empress became interested. Heavy rain, you are full of water. A fine horse with 4 legs. Sea swallows. Renbaqian's voice was full of emotion. With a flick of her chopsticks, a piece of meat on the plate landed on Renbaqian's face. Thank you for the reward, Your Majesty. Renbaqian chuckled, stuffed the piece of meat into his mouth, and wiped his face with a rag. The Empress ignored him, drank a glass of wine, and threw a piece of chocolate into her mouth. Using chocolate to go with wine was quite creative. However, Renbaqian recalled a type of wine chocolate that he had eaten when he was young. He reckoned that the Empress would like it very much. After staying in Liao City for 3 days, the weather finally cleared up, and everyone set off again. It had just rained, and the dirt road was uneven, so they couldn't speed up. Moreover, they encountered heavy rain after just 1 day of walking. Renbaqian sneaked into the Empress's carriage to avoid being drenched. In fact, there were 2 other ox carts carrying food and daily necessities, as well as Lin Xiaola, who hadn't woken up since she boarded the carriage. However, the important thing wasn't which carriage, but who was in it. While listening to the sound of raindrops hitting the carriage, Renbaqian resumed his old hobby and told the Empress a story called A Chinese Ghost Story. The story began with a heavy rain. Ning Kaichen, who was on his way to Guobei County to collect debts, encountered a rainstorm and hid in the legendary Lanrua Temple. Ning Kaichen? I seem to have heard of him somewhere. The name sounded familiar to the Empress. He was there during your birthday celebration. Later on, he came again to deliver a person. Oh, I remember now. It's him. Continue. The Empress thought that the story happened to Ning Kaichen and didn't think much about it. It's just the same name. He didn't experience it personally. Renbaqian pointed it out. Otherwise, when Yan Qixia, Granny Tree Demon, Old Demon Black Mountain, and the others appeared, the Empress would be confused. Next, everyone walked in the mud while Renbaqian told the Empress about strange stories from a Chinese studio. Sometimes the wheels of the ox cart got stuck in the mud, but a guard could lift it out with a lift. This didn't delay the journey. However, the speed of the journey was inevitably reduced. It's hard to walk. Renbaqian, who had just finished telling the painted skin, sighed in the carriage. This journey was indeed difficult. It wasn't the rainy season when they came, so it wasn't that troublesome to walk. However, on their way back, this kind of road was simply torture. Every step they took was filled with mud. The guards outside were like mud balls. Can that kind of cement be used to repair roads? The Empress asked as she looked at the muddy road outside. If you want to get rich, you have to repair roads first. It's time to repair roads first. Cement will do, Renbaqian said as he looked at the road outside. That's good. Fortunately, Great Xia didn't attack it this time. Otherwise, our marching speed would be greatly reduced. Renbaqian smiled. Great Xia's bowstrings can't be used during the rainy season, the Empress explained. Only then did Renbaqian realize that the bowstrings were mainly made of animal tendons and would become soft after being soaked in water. Even if they weren't blistered, the bowstrings would become soft after using them for a while in such a humid environment. It seemed like Great Xia had deliberately attacked a while ago. However, repairing roads requires a lot of manpower and material resources. Next, it will depend on the Protectorate of the Northeast, Renbaqian said after thinking for a while. There were no machines or cars in this world. Everything depended on manpower. Transportation also depended on fork-horned cows and humans. The amount of labor needed to repair the road was huge. In ancient times, people on Earth used laborers. Dayo didn't have laborers, so they had to think of a way to solve the labor problem. It was impossible to hire laborers as Dayo's imperial court couldn't afford it. Also, there weren't that many aboriginals to do this. Therefore, they decided to target the Yun nation. When the time comes, I will tell Zidonglai to capture more people alive. The Empress nodded. In any case, they have 400,000 soldiers, Renbaqian reminded the Empress. The 400,000 soldiers of the Yun nation. can't even compare to the 200,000 soldiers of Great Xia. If there's anything worth praising, it's that the Yin nation's military equipment is pretty good. However, no matter how good the military equipment is, it still needs people to use it, the Empress said softly. According to the schedule, those new soldiers still need another 2 months, but I will let them set off in another month. Now that Great Xia was crippled, these 20,000 new soldiers could be transferred to the Protectorate of the Northeast. After that, there would be another batch of 20,000 new soldiers who would be trained and transferred to the Protectorate of the North. At present, the 180,000 soldiers of Great Xia wouldn't be able to cause too much trouble in a short period of time. It's all thanks to those things of yours. The Empress glanced at Rinpochian. If it weren't for those mortars, grenades, binoculars, walkie-talkies and radios, Great Xia might have been able to win this war. The mortars and grenades could disrupt the enemy's formation. The binoculars and drones could monitor the enemy's situation at any time. Any movement of the enemy's troops could be detected. The walkie-talkies and radios were even more useful. The various armies could directly communicate with each other and be informed of the situation. Orders were transmitted in real time, and the movements of various units in battle were more timely and accurate. It could be said that the walkie-talkies, radios, binoculars, and drones didn't seem as intuitive as the mortars and grenades, but in reality, they were no less effective than the mortars and grenades. After traveling on the muddy road for 20 days, this group of people finally saw Lan City in the distance. We are finally back. Rinpochian alighted from the carriage, stretched his back, and then climbed onto his fork-horned cow. After traveling for so long, he started to miss his students. Now that spring break was over, he didn't know how many idiots would be shot because they couldn't hand in their homework. Chapter 398. The welcome for the Empress this time was much grander than the previous one. After all, it only took slightly more than a month for them to repel Great Xia's attack. All the residents of Lan City were full of pride. This was their Empress. Therefore, when they found out that the Empress had returned, they scrambled to see the Empress with their own eyes. From the city gate to Beihong district, there was a sea of people on both sides. Although it was drizzling, it couldn't stop the enthusiasm of the residents of Lan City. Your Majesty. It's Her Majesty. Your Majesty's martial arts are prosperous. All kinds of cheers came from the crowd on both sides. The curtain in front of the Empress's carriage was pulled open, allowing people to see the Empress in red lying on her side. Just like the first time Rinpochian saw the Empress, she was lying on her side on a thick fur without a smile. Her eyes were gently closed while Hongyuan and Qingyuan followed behind her. Although she wasn't sitting in a very dignified manner, this image was in line with the people's impression of the Empress. Rinpochian obediently followed behind on his fork-horned cow, and it was inevitable that people would point at him. Due to the existence of the radio station, the situation in the north could be transmitted to Lan City every day. Then it was spread to the residences of the officials, and then to the ears of many commoners. Every day, before and after tea, on the streets and in the alleys, all of Lan City was discussing the war in the north. Many things that happened during the war were also spread. As a result, although Rinpochian was still a pretty boy, many people heard that he had done a lot of things during the war with Great Xia. This caused many people to look at him differently. At least he wasn't like a fresh flower stuck in a mosaic. He had almost improved to the point of a fresh flower stuck in cow dung. This progress was gratifying. Rinpochian turned his head to the side, and happened to see a few heads squeezed in front of a window. They were all his students. Rinpochian smiled at them, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. Yagüe saw us. Those students subconsciously shrank their heads back. Du Laolu, have you finished your homework? What's there to be afraid of? Since Her Majesty has returned from such a great victory, she will definitely hold a banquet in the palace, and have other things to deal with. Yagüe definitely won't start school so soon, and will have time to do it. Du Laolu patted his chest, and said in an imposing manner before turning to look at the others. What about you? I haven't done it yet. Several students were like Du Laolu. During the war in the north, they had been talking about the war in the tavern every day, and exchanging information they had heard from their parents. How could they be in the mood to do their homework? Du Laoyu's gaze drifted over everyone, feeling somewhat disappointed. Although he said it straightforwardly, even if school started a few days later, he wouldn't be able to finish his homework even if he stayed at home every day. At that time, he would probably be shot again. Out of all the students, he had been shot the most. Although the wounds would heal after applying the black mud ointment, there were still patches of tender skin that were different from before. Now he didn't even dare to bare his upper body. After taking off his clothes, his arms and shoulders were covered with finger-sized white spots. Those who didn't know better would think that he had a skin disease. "I've done most of it," someone finally said. Everyone's eyes were on that person. "Brother, whether we live or die is up to you," Du Laoyu said as he hooked his arm around his brother's neck. "A bunch of trash." A little lowly walked down from upstairs with a look of disdain. "Have you finished your homework?" Everyone's eyes lit up. "Humph." The little lowly proudly raised her head and walked down the stairs, ignoring everyone's envious gazes. After leaving the tavern, she drooped her head and went straight to the Tong residence. After returning home, she was in a mess. Then, she gritted her teeth and started to do her homework. When Renbachian returned to Pingle Park, he immediately saw two black and white round fellows. One of them was lying on the ground while the other was stepping on it and climbing up a tree. Almost a year had passed, and the two little fellows had grown up quite a bit. Renbachian walked over, and the two little fellows looked at him. Then, Renbachian dragged the panda on the bottom out, and the one on top couldn't stand anymore, and immediately fell down. Renbachian laughed heartily, hugged the furry panda, and rubbed his face against it. It had a familiar smell. The other panda rolled on the ground, ran over with its mouth open, and tried to push him away. In the end, it was gently pushed by Renbachian, causing it to tumble and cry out in grievance. Renbachian rubbed the two pandas, returned to the house, and looked around. There wasn't much dust. It seemed like someone had been cleaning the house after he left. Then he fell onto the bed. He was finally home and could finally sleep on the bed. Long-distance travel in this world was simply too troublesome. When Renbachian was woken up, it was almost dark. He stretched and felt much more comfortable. "Sir, Her Majesty wants you to attend the banquet in a while," Shirhu reported. "Everyone in the imperial court is going." Yes. Renbachian thought about it. It seemed like he only had his previous robe. "Her Majesty asked someone to rush out a new robe for you. I reckon it will be delivered soon," Shirhu said. "Get someone to boil the water. I'll take a bath first." After he was done bathing, the robe was delivered. With his current official position, his robe was purple with beautiful embroidery of birds and beasts. It looked much better than his previous robe. The last time he attended the banquet, Renbachian sat at the end. If not for the Empress's special permission, he wouldn't have been qualified to attend. This time his seat was slightly higher in the middle. He sat together with Feng Ho and a few officials from the Ministry of Works. Below him were Feng Ho from the Department of Ordnance and Gu Yihong from the Department of Agriculture and Livestock. Above him were the 6 ministers, the Great Elder and the Young Elder. Renbachian received a lot of attention the moment he came in. There were also a few people who greeted him, and they were all officials from the Ministry of Works whom he had dealt with before. As for the other ministries, the Ministry of War treated him rather kindly. Other people didn't know what effect the things that Renbachian had on the front line had, but the people from the Ministry of War were very clear about it. Furthermore, his idea of a militia had satisfied the people from the Ministry of War. As a result, they showed their goodwill when they saw him. For example, sneering at him. If he didn't know better, he would have thought that they were going to beat him up. "Sir Run, you have worked hard on this trip." Just as Renbachian sat down, Feng Ho came in and sat beside him with a smile. "To serve the people." Renbachian was very polite. "Feng Ho, what the hell was this? How's the blast furnace?" Renbachian asked. "It's still under construction. There's been a lot of rain these days, so the construction has slowed down quite a bit," Feng Ho said. The rainy season came earlier in Lan City, and it had been raining continuously these days. Even the speed at which the cement was fired had been slowed down. As a result, By the time Rinpochian returned, the progress of the blast furnace was only half done. Now that he had achieved hydraulic hammer forging, it was much easier, and the speed at which he forged weapons was much faster. But the blast furnaces were only half built, and now the iron was not enough to keep up. Rinpochian chatted with Feng Ho for a while before the 6 ministers came in one after another. Following them were the Great Elder and the Second Elder. After everyone was seated, the Empress walked into the hall. "We welcome your Majesty and congratulate your Majesty on your triumphant return." Everyone stood up and bowed. "Have a seat," the Empress said faintly and sat down at the seat of honor. She then said, "Today we're not going to talk about national affairs. We're just here to celebrate. Dance." As soon as the Empress finished speaking, 6 strong men and 6 women entered the hall. The men were wearing leather shorts while the women were wearing tube tops and leather skirts. As the fast-paced drums sounded, the 12 people began to dance a primitive dance in the hall. Many of their movements were similar to hunting, and their mouths were full of energy. Ah, ah. Their voices were full of wildness. Following that, the sound of Ansun was heard, adding a touch of desolation to the wildness. It was as if they were in the endless wilderness. This is a celebratory dance. In the past, when we were in the village, we would dance this kind of dance if we hunted a lot or defeated an enemy, Feng Ho explained in a low voice. He knew that Rinpochian didn't understand this dance. Rinpochian nodded. This kind of primitive dance was interesting and full of vitality. As the dance ended, a few middle-aged women played instruments that looked like pipas. The atmosphere in the hall immediately became cheerful. Starting from the Great Elder, the ministers also began to toast the Empress. The hall was full of joy and harmony, until 1 hour later. Following that, a loud shout was heard. "Ignorant Tong, what did you say? Do you want to have a taste of the sharpness of my saber? Come, come, come. Today, I will teach you a lesson." Following that, Tong Jingye's voice was heard. Following that, there was a series of banging sounds. Tong Jingye and Qin Chuan directly flipped the table and jumped to the center of the hall. Tong Jingye used Black Tiger Steel's heart. Qin Chuan used Monkey Steel's peach. Tong Jingye used Black Tiger Steel's heart. Qin Chuan used Black Tiger Steel's heart. And I used Black Tiger Steel's heart 3 times in a row. Qin Chuan used Fishing the Moon from the Bottom of the Sea 4 times in a row, 5 times in a row. There were even people at the side who were cheering loudly. Lord Tong's attack came at just the right time. It interrupted Lord Qin's accumulation of power and forced him to defend. Lord Qin fell into a disadvantageous position after losing 1 move. Lord Tong attacked again at this moment, forcing Lord Qin to retreat. Feng Ho evaluated from the side. His voice wasn't soft either. Rinpochian was embarrassed. How could you see so much about Tong Jingye's Black Tiger Steel's heart 13 times in a row? Feng Ho, you're spouting nonsense. Someone at the opposite table immediately shouted out. Following that, plates and cups flew toward Feng Ho. Rinpochian looked at the situation and quickly crawled to the side. He then heard a series of crashing sounds behind him. By the time he crawled behind a pillar, Feng Ho had already started fighting with a burly man from the Ministry of War. Then plates and bowls started flying on both sides of the hall. Rinpochian stretched out his hand and caught a pork knuckle in the air. When he took a closer look, he didn't know who had taken 2 big bites. After thinking for a while, he threw the pork knuckle away. "Sir Run, sit here." Shiqing, who was not far away, waved at him. Rinpochian only took 2 steps before he stopped. He saw a huge figure flying toward Shiqing, knocking him and the table to the ground. Tong Jingye got up from the ground, picked Shiqing up, and put him on the ground. He looked around, and his eyes lit up. He picked up the table that Shiqing had knocked over and threw it at Qin Chuan. Seeing this, Rinpochian felt that it was better for him to stay here. He turned to look at the Empress, only to see her sitting at the seat of honor and drinking by herself, as if she didn't see anything. The people below were in such a mess, but the Empress was still so calm. Chapter 399. The capital of the Yun nation, Wangjing, was said to have been established by a demoted prince of Great Xia in the previous dynasty. At that time, the location of the Yun nation was a desolate and uninhabited land. It wasn't until a long time later that all kinds of sinners, peasants who fled from famine, and all kinds of talents formed a nation in that area, and Wangjing became the imperial capital. After that, the people of that nation merged with the aboriginals in the south, and established the predecessor of the Chun nation. The original Hao nation was established by an army and aboriginals who fled from the previous dynasty. Later, Great Xia replaced the previous dynasty, and the Yun nation also killed all the royal family of the previous dynasty. The aboriginals overthrew the Hao nation. This change of dynasty finally resulted in the current situation. Wangjing was considered a super city in this era with a population of over 1 million. Merchants from all over the world gathered here. Even some merchants from Great Xia said that compared to the imperial capital of Great Xia, Wangjing was more likable. At least it wasn't as dull. Wangjing was most famous for its flower boats on the Sanhua River. Hundreds of giant boats on the vast river were brightly lit throughout the night. Music and laughter reached the shore. Every place was a money-squandering den. Next was the east of the city. Almost half of the city was filled with all kinds of shops. Merchants from all over the world came and went, and there were even people from the sea who came to purchase goods. Prosperous, befuddled, and indulging in a life of luxury. This was the evaluation given by everyone who visited Wangjing. There was even a story about the son of an island owner, who didn't want to go back after coming to Wangjing. He even gave up his position as the island owner just to live a carefree life. This was widely spread in the Yun nation, and made the people of Wangjing feel proud. There was also the envoy from the Chun nation who didn't change for decades. The emperor of the Chun nation once asked him if he wanted to return home, but he replied, "I'm willing to stay here for the rest of my life." From these two incidents, one could get a general idea of Wangjing. It was a place where people were truly addicted to. However, the atmosphere in Wangjing had somewhat changed these days. Even the lingering music from the musical instruments that sounded like lovers' whispers had lessened. Instead, there were more drum sounds and three-string zither sounds. There was a lot more murderous intent in the air. Those young masters who were jealous of each other in the past were no longer talking about romance. Instead, they were talking about military affairs. The Yun nation's attack on Dayo this time was considered by the people of the Yun nation as revenge. They wanted to avenge the country that was almost destroyed decades ago. Although these young people had not experienced that scene, they all felt that it was a disgrace. Now that they had mobilized their troops to attack, it was time for them to show their country's might and take revenge. All of them were in high spirits as they discussed when they could break into Dayo. A blind musician on a fancy boat shook his head. He did not understand the national affairs, but he knew that these young masters were underestimating Dayo. He didn't know much about Dayo, but he had lived for a long time. At that time, he wasn't blind yet and had seen with his own eyes how terrifying those barbarians were. Not only on the boats, but also on the streets and alleys, as well as among the traveling merchants. Many of them were discussing the war. The Yun nation had been peaceful for too long. This time, they sent troops to attack the enemy that almost destroyed the Yun nation. Most people in Wangjing were focused on this war. There were also people who were keenly aware of the undercurrents surging in the Yun nation. Or it could be said that someone had already sensed it a year ago, or even longer. As a result, a few people from the Zhang family went to Lan City to look for an opportunity to get in touch with Dayo. Unfortunately, the aboriginals still strongly discriminated against foreigners. Although an outsider was chosen by the Empress as a husband, they still couldn't find any opportunities. They brought gifts to all the residences in the imperial court, but were met with disdain and rejection. Most of them were chased out by the gatekeepers before they even saw the owner of the gifts. The ordinary people in Wangjing only knew that there was a war against Dayo, and everyone was looking forward to the news of victory. What they didn't know was that recently, the Western City Army had sent 7 memorials at top speed. 3 of them stated the severity of the situation and suggested a retreat, but they were all suppressed. The last 4 memorials asked for money, food, manpower, and ordnance. The first 3 memorials were about Zhu Wuzhen doing his best. The last 4 memorials were about knowing that the imperial court had already made a decision and thinking of ways to increase their odds of success. Moving the North Army to the west. Now that he has 400,000 soldiers, isn't that enough? There are also the newly developed box crossbows. Against 15,000 barbarians, he still needs manpower? More than one person felt incredulous after seeing the memorials sent by the Western City Army. With 400,000 people, even if one of them pissed, they would be able to destroy Sanchi City. Furthermore, the North Army had other uses. Taking the opportunity of attacking Dayo and taking back the authority of the warlords. How could they send the North Army to the west? Tell him that he will only send other reinforcements when there is progress in the war. The Western Garrison Army broke their legs from running around in Wangjing. In the end, they only obtained another 20 ballistae. In addition to the previous ones, they had a total of 60 ballistae. Each ballistae could fire 132 bolts in one round. This was the latest military equipment developed by the Yun nation. The Western City Army walked out of the yamen and spat unwillingly. They had no choice but to go back and report to the commander while cursing. This bunch of bastards. 400,000 soldiers? What use was the coalition army of the warlords? Only the 180,000 soldiers of the Western City Army were useful. However, they were going to attack the city now. The 15,000 barbarians were equivalent to at least 150,000 soldiers. Even a fool knew that attacking a city required at least a few times the number of soldiers. Now that the ratio of military strength was almost 1-to-1, even if the Western City Army was drained of blood, they might not be able to take down Sanchi City. After receiving the news, Zhu Wuzhen pondered for a night and wrote another letter. There is a saying in the art of war. Surround the enemy 10 times, attack 5 times, and divide the enemy. A month ago, Great Xia besieged Ping City and Shun City, but did not attack. Zhu Wuzhen first elaborated on the art of war, but this time, he didn't want the North Army. Instead, he wanted the cities to continue sending reinforcements. In the letter, he first explained that it was impossible to attack Sanchi City with the current military strength. Even the 700,000 soldiers of Great Xia besieged Ping City and Shun City, but did not attack. Instead, the Western City Army went straight in. Since he couldn't send the North Army, he wanted the cities to continue sending reinforcements. With at least 200,000 reinforcements, he could besiege Sanchi City and split some of his troops to attack Dayo. If Sanchi City sent reinforcements, it would be in line with his intentions. Whether it was besieging the troops or continuing to attack Sanchi City, it would achieve the desired effect. They could advance and retreat at will, and were in an invincible position. If Sanchi City didn't send troops to attack, it would be like Great Xia and mainly destroy Dayo's fields and villages. If most of the fields and pastures in the north and east were destroyed, Dayo's harvest this year could be imagined. When the Chun nation sent troops, it would be a pincer attack. There was danger outside and a famine inside. Naturally, Dayo wouldn't be able to withstand it. As the combat strength of the city's armies would be reduced when they joined forces, most of the warlords' armies would be sent into Dayo. Military merits would be calculated according to the number of enemies killed. Even the commoners would be counted as aboriginal soldiers. For Zhu Wuzhen, this was the best method he could use at present. Since the imperial court didn't want to send the North Army and wholeheartedly focused on the warlords, he would help them. If 300,000 warlords were thrown into Dayo, even 300,000 ants would be able to bite a few people to death, let alone 300,000 soldiers. When the time came, the cities would act on their own. This would prevent the result of not increasing, but decreasing their combat strength. Military merits would also be calculated for the commoners, and there would be no need to worry about them not contributing. It would be best if they could lure the aboriginal soldiers out of Sanchi City. Even if they couldn't, they could still create a lot of trouble for Dayo. As he said, as long as the fields of Dayo were destroyed, there would definitely be a famine in Dayo this year. Even if the Yun nation couldn't win this war, it wouldn't be defeated even if they didn't win on the battlefield. Even if they didn't win on the battlefield, as long as they could drag down Dayo, it would be considered a victory. He would continue to do what Great Xia hadn't finished. He was using Wu Shengho's method to bully Dayo's small population. No matter how strong Dayo was, there were only so many soldiers. As long as they attacked more, they would be able to make the other party lose focus and reveal flaws. At present, the imperial court was thinking about how to weaken the cities. Zhu Wuzhen's request could be said to be in line with everyone's wishes. Just as he expected, the imperial court immediately agreed. Chapter 400. In the imperial court, the Empress took out 2 bright red, rectangular, flat, and fine bricks from the side of the throne. With a wave of her hand, one of them flew out, followed by the other. One of the officials from the Public Order Bureau and the Department of the Army, who were fighting below, was hit on the head by a flying brick. Then the other was hit on the head by a flying brick. Your Majesty! Both of them stopped fighting, turned around, and cupped their hands toward the Empress. The Empress patted the dust off her hands, and was very satisfied. This thing was really easy to handle. Whether it was the weight or the shape, it felt different when she threw it, and its accuracy was extremely high. It seemed like she had to carry a few more bricks with her in the future. Nowadays, bricks were still a rarity in Dayo. They were only used in glass factories, cement factories, and blast furnaces. Most of the commoners had never seen them before. It wasn't like Earth, where materials could be found anywhere. The militia is still under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of War, the Empress said faintly. However, this name doesn't sound good. Change it. After the Empress returned, this was the first time she attended court. After settling some other matters, she raised the issue of the militia. In fact, this matter had already been carried out. Because of the urgency of the war, the cities and towns in the north of Dayo had basically been established. There was still no movement in other areas, and they were waiting for the Empress to come back and officially arrange this matter. Just now, the officials from the Public Order Bureau and the Department of the Army had quarreled over which department would be responsible for the militia. However, both of them weren't good with words, so they simply vented their hatred with their fists. Of course, even if one of them had a sharp tongue, the result would still be the same. In addition to the two of them, Minister of War Qin Chuan and Minister of Justice Louis Dao were also staring at each other with a kill you look. If the Empress didn't stop them, after the two officials were done fighting, it would be time for the two of them to put on a show. Shi Qing thought for a while and said, "Since the people are the army, why don't we call it the militia?" "What's the difference from the militia?" The Empress looked at him sideways. "Why don't we call it the reserve army?" Qin Chuan suggested. It turned out that it was a mistake for the Empress to let these officials think of names. "Principal Run, do you have any ideas?" After hearing 7 or 8 names in a row, the Empress helplessly looked at Ren Baqian, who was in the middle. It was rare for Ren Baqian to attend a court session. He personally witnessed 2 rank 4 officials fighting over a few words. Immediately, he understood why the Empress was so calm during the banquet. He was the only newcomer here, so he simply looked down and pretended to be daydreaming. Now that he heard the Empress call his name, Ren Baqian had no choice but to step forward and say, "Why don't we call the city enforcement team?" Therefore, this militia should be under the jurisdiction of the Public Order Bureau. From its name, you can tell that it's a department under the Public Order Bureau. Bai Shiying immediately followed up on Ren Baqian's words. Ugh. Ren Baqian saw that everyone from the Ministry of War was staring at him. He reckoned that they were wondering which part of his body was more resistant to beatings. "Why don't we call them the guards?" Ren Baqian quickly changed his mind. This time, it was the people from the Ministry of Justice who were glaring at him. "It's better for your Majesty to decide on the specific name." After saying this, Ren Baqian continued to look down. He made up his mind that it would be better for him not to attend court sessions for no reason in the future. If someone were to give him a beating one day, he wouldn't be able to reason with them. "Let's call them the guards, and they will be under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of War. Depending on the size of each town, there will be 1,000 to 3,000 people. They will do what they are supposed to do. Every year, they will have 3 months of training. During the training period, they will provide food and weapons." The Empress made the final decision, following which Ren Baqian continued to daydream. He only came back to his senses when he heard the words "court session is dismissed." After lunch, he summoned Tang Feng and Gu Ziheng, the 2 managers of the caravan. "Sir." In Pingle Park, Run Baqian was teasing the panda. He flipped Tian Tian on the ground with its belly facing the sky and scratched the area near Tian Tian's little penis. The panda was so angry that it opened its mouth to bite him, but Run Baqian pressed its head back with one hand. He realized that the panda didn't seem to like people scratching the area near its belly. Every time he scratched that area, Tian Tian and Gun Gun would bite him, but he didn't get tired of it. "You are here. How are your injuries?" Ren Baqian finally let go of Tian Tian, who had been tortured by him for half a day. He raised his head and smiled. Tian Tian quickly got up and walked away while groaning. Its voice was filled with grievance. "Thanks to Sir, my injuries have mostly recovered," the 2 of them replied. "Well, the situation is chaotic now. There are battles everywhere. Both of you should rest for a while. At the same time, help me collect some things." "Sir, please speak." Run Baqian looked at the 2 of them. Perhaps it was because they had more dealings with people from other nations. The way they spoke was different from ordinary aboriginals. They were more polite and didn't speak as gruffly. Run Baqian returned to his room, took out a piece of paper, and handed it to the 2 of them. "Collect according to this. Collect 45 sets first." On the paper were the medicinal herbs that Rinpoche needed to practice martial arts. He needed 1 set every week for a medicinal bath. 45 sets could be used for 10 months. The 7,000 taels of gold that the 2 of them brought back was equivalent to 70,000 taels of silver, which was barely enough to purchase 50 sets. However, Rinpoche only allowed them to collect 45 sets. "The 2 of us will do our best." After the 2 of them looked through the paper, Tang Feng folded it and carefully kept it in his pocket. "You can split the rest of the money. After all, Her Majesty doesn't need hungry soldiers. However, the age and quality of the things that I want must be of the highest quality. Don't make any mistakes." "Thank you, sir." The 2 of them thanked him sincerely. Ren Baqian had made a mistake and obtained 7,000 taels of silver. To the 2 of them, it was a huge sum of money. Naturally, their subordinates had to get some as well. Also, for those who died outside, they had to send some back home as well. Even so, this was still a big reward for everyone. You don't have to collect all the things in one go. However, send a batch back as soon as possible. I am still waiting to use them. Ren Baqian waved his hand after he finished speaking. "You may leave." After the 2 of them left, Ren Baqian sat in the garden for a while. He called the guards over and asked them to inform the students that school would start in 3 days. As the guards searched the houses one by one according to the addresses, it was a scene of chaos everywhere. When Ren Baqian wasn't around, they more or less missed school. After all, they could learn a lot of things that they had never heard before. However, when Ren Baqian returned, the image of him waving his gun and flying into a rage reappeared in everyone's mind. Especially the damn homework. For the past 2 months, they had been playing wild. It was as if they had returned to the carefree days of drinking and fighting. Homework had long been thrown to the back of their minds. Did anyone inform you? There are still 3 days left. A few students gathered together with a bitter look on their faces. Don't mention it. How did time pass so quickly? It feels like we haven't even played for a few days, and Yagüe is already back. Do you know who has finished their homework? Now, homework was the most pressing issue. There were still 3 days left, and they wouldn't be able to finish it even if they burned the midnight oil every day. If they had a choice, they really wanted to borrow another 500 days from the heavens. Tong Wan seems to have finished her homework. I saw her the other day. Although she didn't say it, she seemed to have finished it, someone immediately suggested. That little fellow might not lend it to us to copy, right? We have to try. With so many of us going together, I don't believe that she won't lend it to us. Go, go, go. An hour later, along with a few screams, the little Lolita, Tong Wan, clapped her hands and instructed the others. Throw these piles of trash out. Then, she returned to her room and continued to do her homework while gnashing her teeth. The The students of the Black Bamboo Academy began to rack their brains after Ren Baqian informed them of the school's opening date. Chapter 401. Jinyuan City wasn't considered a big city in Great Xia, but it had a population of tens of thousands. It was morning and it was a little chilly in May. Dozens of people formed a long line in front of the gate. They could only enter after paying the entrance fee. There were farmers who wanted to enter the city with their own vegetables, hunters who brought along mountain delicacies, and a few people who were dressed in green robes and carried long swords. It was obvious that they were scholars who were out traveling. "Is the earth dragon turning over?" someone shouted when he felt the tremors under his feet. Everyone revealed a panicked expression and wanted to run towards the open space. As long as the earth dragon turning over wasn't too serious, it would be safe as long as it was in an open space. More than a decade ago, an earth dragon turning over happened here. Thousands of people were buried in collapsed houses in the middle of the night. The people here still remembered it vividly. "Don't panic, it's a cavalry," a knowledgeable scholar said with a smile. "Ordinary people can't see a cavalry unit, so it's normal to have such a misunderstanding." Another scholar patted his shoulder and said, "I can't compare to you two brothers. To be honest, I've never seen a cavalry unit. If you two didn't say anything, I'm afraid I would have thought that it was an earth dragon turning over." A thinner scholar cupped his hands in obeisance. Why would a cavalry unit come here at this time? The first scholar to speak was puzzled. His name was Li Mengyuan, and he was quite famous in his hometown. His uncle was a 5th-rank military officer. "That's the imperial court's business. I think they're going to the south." The thinner scholar was obviously not interested in this. "Jinyan, don't say that. The nation's business is the world's business. How can the world's business have nothing to do with us? When we enter the imperial court, we have to pay more attention to everything," Li Mengyuan warned. "You're right, brother. Thank you for your advice." The thinner scholar cupped his hands in obeisance. His name was Yao Jingyan. They turned their heads and saw a black line on the distant horizon, followed by a long earth dragon. "I didn't expect Wu Shengho to be defeated." Other than Li Mengyuan and Yao Jingyan, there was another scholar called Su Pingji. He was the one who sighed. "I really didn't expect it. The imperial court has prepared for so many years. 700,000 soldiers and countless rations have all gone down the drain." Li Mengyuan shook his head. "Are those Dayo people really like what the legends say?" Yao Jingyan asked. Now that Great Xia had lost the war, everyone on the streets and alleys were talking about Dayo as if they were gods. According to the commoners, the people of Dayo wore leather skirts, bared their upper bodies, and let out barbaric howls during battle. An ordinary soldier was 8 feet tall, and could carry a rod that weighed a few hundred kilograms. With a swing of the rod, he could send a person flying. "You've heard about it too?" Li Mengyuan laughed. He had also heard of this rumor. "It's not as exaggerated as the rumors say, but it's indeed powerful. Ordinary soldiers in Dayo are at the manual level, and they can even become team leaders in Dayo. Even the commoners could attain the manual level. Fortunately, there weren't many of them. The entire Dayo had less than 100,000 soldiers. In addition, the officials were vulgar and did not understand military affairs or military equipment. That's why I've always been content with this one," Li Mengyuan explained. At this time, the transmission of information wasn't very advanced. Most of the information was based on falsehoods. Ordinary people knew very little about Dayo. His family had a military background and knew a little more about Dayo. "That's still very powerful," Yao Jingyan replied after thinking for a while. He knew the strength of a manual expert. An ordinary manual expert would be able to make a name for himself wherever he went. In Great Xia's military system, 10 people formed a battalion, and 5 battalions formed a team. A team leader would be in charge of 50 people. As long as a manual expert joined the army, he would be in charge of at least 50 people. From this, one could see the status of a manual expert in Great Xia. It was somewhat exaggerated that the commoners of Dayo were all manual experts. "Do they eat people?" Yao Jingyan asked again. Many people on the streets and alleys swore that the barbarians in the south ate people. He had been curious about this matter for a long time. Were there really people who ate people? Although the people of Dayo were barbaric and backward, they were still human. Upon hearing this, Li Mingyuan frowned. After thinking for a while, he said, "I'm not sure about this matter either. However, I think there might be a reason for this groundless rumor." Just as they were chatting, there was a sudden exclamation from the top of the city wall. "It's the people of Dayo. Close the city gate. Quickly close the city gate." At the same time, the sound of drums was heard from the top of the city wall and transmitted into the city. "People of Dayo?" The three scholars were startled. They turned their heads and looked in the direction of the cavalry. Doubts emerged in their minds. This was the hinterland of Great Xia. Why were the people of Dayo here? Could it be that the border was lost? Even if the border was lost, it was impossible for them to fight their way here so quickly, right? Nearby, there were anxious shouts from other people. "Quickly let us in." After a while, the city gate slowly closed. Li Mingyuan pulled a guard who was running down from the city wall and asked, "How many people are there? Can they defend?" That guard was already anxious. After being pulled by someone, he couldn't shake him off even after trying twice. He realized that the other party was quite strong. Seeing that the guard was still a scholar, he replied, "I don't know. All the people in the army have been transferred away. Now there are only 1,000 people in the city." Upon hearing this, Li Mingyuan immediately let go of him. "It's over." Li Mingyuan's face turned deathly pale. The other two also heard it clearly, and their faces turned pale. Judging from the dust raised by the cavalry in the distance, there are at least 2,000 to 3,000 people. Furthermore, Dayo soldiers are at least at the man-will level. For the elite winged cavalry, only earth-will experts can enter. 1,000 people can't defend at all. Li Mingyuan muttered to himself. Previously, when Great Xia attacked the south, most of the soldiers in the country were transferred away. Under normal circumstances, there wouldn't be any problems. After all, there were still some guards left in every city. However, now that Dayo was here, the defensive line formed by these guards was too weak. It was as if it would be torn apart at any moment. "Who's babbling nonsense? If you continue to mislead people with your lies, I'll behead you first." Not far away, someone scolded angrily. Li Mingyuan looked up and realized that the other party was dressed like a captain. He calmed himself down and apologized. "Sorry, I was distracted for a moment." Although his face was pale, he managed to calm down. "What do we do now?" The other two looked at him. "Let's find a place to hide first. Now that it's chaotic, we shouldn't stay outside." Li Mingyuan hurriedly pulled the other two into the city. Currently, the city was also in chaos. Hearing that Dayo was attacking, there were anxious shouts of adults and cries of children everywhere. There were also soldiers on horses galloping madly in the city, constantly shouting, "Get out of the way! Get out of the way!" "Are we really unable to defend?" Su Pingji whispered. "It's difficult." Li Mingyuan shook his head. "However, it's not that there's no chance. There should be many experts from the martial arts schools in the city. If we gather them together, they might be of some use." Li Mingyuan knew that even then, the chances were very slim. However, this was the only chance they had. If the two armies confronted each other, they wouldn't stand a chance at all. However, if they were to defend the city, they would more or less be of some use. If they were lucky, after the Dayo people realized that Jinyu City wasn't easy to deal with, they might turn to other cities. Those Dayo people probably didn't attack from the border. They might have come from the Liaoning mountain range. It's impossible for them to have siege equipment. How are they going to break the city walls? Su Pingji asked. That's why I said there's still a glimmer of hope. It all depends on whether the experts from the martial arts schools can stop the Dayo people from rushing into the city to open the city gates, Li Mingyuan explained. One had to know that the current city gates were usually made of a palm-thick wooden plank with 2 layers of iron plates. This was to prevent experts from breaking the city gates. Chapter 402. Stop. Following the order, thousands of hungry Aboriginal soldiers stopped 5 kilometers away from Jinyu City. They looked at the city, subconsciously licked their lips, and their eyes glowed. According to the plan, they should have attacked another city at least 7 days ago. However, the tragedy was that they actually went the wrong way. They were delayed for a full 7 days before they came out of the mountain range. If they hadn't caught a lot of wild beasts and picked some wild fruits, which somewhat delayed the livestock they brought with them, they would have had to kill their mounts to appease their hunger. Even so, thousands of people were so hungry that their chests were sticking to their backs. Their stomachs were rumbling, and they couldn't wait to attack the city in front of them to have a big meal. Li Qianqiu rode his fork-horned cow to the front of the troops. He looked at the top of the city with a pair of binoculars and saw terrified faces. He roughly looked at the number of people and immediately felt relieved. There were only a few hundred people at the top of the city wall. As expected, the interior of Great Xia was also empty, and there was nothing that could stop this army. The winged cavalry open the city gate and arrest all those who resisted. The 1st and 2nd battalions will control the 4 city gates. The rest will collect food and livestock first. The rest will also gather at the magistrate office in the city. Li Qianqiu waved his hand. It wasn't difficult to attack this city. Even if there was some resistance, they weren't a match for the nearly 1,000 earth-wheel-winged cavalry warriors. The next step was to snatch food. Snatch food. Snatch food. Kill. Break the city. Kill. Following Li Qianqiu's order, the 1,000 winged cavalry warriors dismounted, held their sabers, and rushed toward Jinyu City in the distance. It took them less than 3 minutes to cover the 5 kilometers. Sparse arrows were shot from the top of the city wall. To these earth-wheel-winged cavalry warriors, these arrows couldn't even disturb them. Many of them grabbed them with their bare hands and threw them back. Then the figures jumped 7 to 8 meters with the help of a run-up, and with a single kick, they flipped over the city wall. 100 ordinary soldiers wouldn't be able to defeat one winged cavalry warrior. Not to mention the current situation, where it was almost 2 winged cavalry warriors against 1 ordinary soldier. It was equivalent to 2 tigers staring at a little white rabbit. When the guards on the city wall saw these Dayo people actually jump up the city wall that was 10 meters high, their legs went soft, and they couldn't move. Rays of saber gleam lit up. Screams of death could be heard coming from the city walls. A moment later, the city gate was opened. To this army, the resistance in the city was like a delicate little Lolita shyly pushing away a 2-meter-tall man who weighed 300 kilograms. Enter the city. Li Qianqiu ordered. By the time everyone entered the city gate, the winged cavalry had already charged towards the magistrate office in the middle. Along the way, they encountered some resistance. The Great Xia officials had gathered some famous martial artists in the city, but just as they gathered, the city gate was broken. Then, more than a dozen earth-wheel experts faced nearly 1,000 winged cavalry warriors. At that time, their eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. However, the winged cavalry didn't listen to their nagging and immediately slashed down with their sabers. In the end, only 2 of them managed to escape from the city. Of the 3,000 soldiers, half went to control the 4 city gates, while the other half began to loot everywhere. One by one, the winged cavalry warriors kicked open the tightly shut doors of the houses, glared at them and shouted, "Hand over all the food!" Those Great Xia commoners were already scared to death. When their doors were kicked open, they were completely disheartened. In the end, they heard the burly man holding the saber say, "Hand over all the food!" Trembling, they immediately put all the food in their houses into a bag and handed it over. Then, the burly man carried the food to the next house. The Great Xia commoners were left to heave a sigh of relief after shutting their doors tightly. The small inn that Li Mingyuan and the other 2 were hiding in was not spared either. When there was a commotion in the courtyard, the 3 of them were in their throats. In the end, those Dayo soldiers actually snatched the food and left, leaving the 3 of them hiding in the room dumbfounded. They are here to snatch the food? Dayo doesn't even have food to eat? I've long heard that Dayo is a barren land, but I didn't expect it to be so poor. Yao Jingyan was a little dumbfounded. In the records of previous wars, there was never a rule that only food was taken after the city was breached. Most of them plundered wantonly, and many of them raped and pillaged. After a disaster, even if every family wasn't in mourning, they would at least be in mourning. Yet, these Dayo people came in and snatched the food. They didn't care about anything else and just left. This was really beyond his expectations. I hope we will be safe this time. The other two were now focused on preserving their lives. Ever since they knew that Dayo was going to attack the city, the two of them had been worried. In the chaos of war, there was nowhere to run. If they were careless, they might lose their heads. Now that those Dayo people had snatched the food, it couldn't be any better. Before noon, the original magistrate's office was piled up with a huge pile of food. There were very few livestock. Most of them were chickens and ducks, and a small number were horses and cows. Most of them were coarse rice and other grains. From noon until late at night, the smoke in the magistrate's office didn't stop. Thousands of people ate lunch, dinner, and supper after dinner. Those coarse rice and other grains were really not of much use as they could barely replenish their blood. If they needed 5 kilograms of meat, this kind of coarse rice would need 20 to 15 kilograms. Almost everyone had to eat half a pot to barely replenish their body's needs. However, as they moved, they soon felt hungry again. From afternoon until late at night, all the soldiers were in a cycle of eating, going out to scavenge for food, sending it back to the magistrate's office, eating, going out to scavenge for food, and eating again. The next day, dozens of scholars were captured in the city. Li Mengyuan and the other two were among them. The dozens of scholars were like livestock waiting to be slaughtered as they trembled in the middle. Surrounding them were tall and strong men holding gleaming steel sabers. Li Mengyuan and the others were ashen-faced. They didn't know what these Dayo people were going to do. Distribute paper and pens to them. I'll speak, and you guys write. Once you're done, I'll let you go. Li Qianqiu said in a deep voice as he stood on the steps in front of everyone. Only then did everyone feel a little more at ease. After the papers and pens were distributed, a few scholars sat cross-legged on the ground. The others followed suit and spread the papers on the ground. They sat cross-legged and prepared to write. Li Qianqiu took out a piece of paper and read from it. Xia Baichong is ruthless and tyrannical. For his own selfish reasons, he led troops to attack Dayo. Now he has suffered heavy casualties, and 500,000 great Xia soldiers are buried in foreign lands. However, isn't Dayo innocent for suffering this calamity? Great Xia has to compensate Dayo for the funeral expenses, city repairs, farmland damage, mental damage, felling of trees, cleaning of garbage, and burying of corpses. A total of 105 million taels of silver. A life for a life, a debt for a debt, and compensation for damage is a matter of course. Xia Baichong did something wrong, but didn't want to bear the consequences and refused to pay compensation. Dayo will collect it ourselves. If you want to blame someone, blame Xia Baichong. After Li Qianqiu finished speaking, he rubbed his head and cursed. What the F***ck? What kind of nonsense is this? What are you looking at? Why aren't you writing? Li Qianqiu scowled at those scholars who were in a daze. If the monarch is insulted, the officials will die. You have insulted our monarch, so I'd rather die than write. A scholar threw his pen away, raised his head and scolded. Drag him out and behead him. Where is his home? Behead him together. Li Qianqiu waved his hand, and that scholar was dragged out. I will take responsibility for my own actions and not implicate my family. That scholar cursed as he was dragged away. This is called reuniting your family, so that you won't be lonely on the road. Li Qianqiu had a look of disdain on his face. You are really uncultured. How can you call yourself a scholar? With a flash of the saber, a person's head fell off, and fresh blood spurted out for several meters. Go and ask who captured him, where his home is, and send him and his family on their way. Li Qianqiu looked at the guards beside him and said to the crowd below. Principal Run once said that the most important thing for a family is to be reunited. I deeply agree with this. Are you going to write or die? Seeing that scholar get beheaded, everyone felt sorrowful. This group of damned barbarians. Everyone cursed in their hearts, but they didn't dare to express it. No one wanted to test whether their neck was harder, or the saber was sharper. Furthermore, this group of barbarians didn't just kill people, but also harmed their entire families. Such means made it impossible for them to resist. However, which was more important, life or integrity? For the majority of people, life was more important. They could only comfort themselves that even if they didn't write, someone else would. After a while, Li Qianqiu held the paper that he had written and said meaningfully, "That's why the more books you read, the worse you are and the more timid you become." His words made everyone's faces turn red with anger. Half a day later, these pieces of paper were pasted all over the main locations of Golden City. Li Qianqiu had been plundering Golden City for 2 full days, and almost all the livestock had been gathered together. In addition, there was also a large amount of gold, silver, jewelry and salt, which were all plundered from those shops and wealthy families. As for those small families, Li Qianqiu couldn't be bothered with them. He only needed to grab the most valuable things. Grabbing too many things would be detrimental to the operation. To the ordinary people of Golden City, this was a blessing in disguise. Find a few people who know the way and set off tomorrow. Li Qianqiu instructed the people beside him. This time, he wasn't going to take a detour. 2 hours later, Li Mingyuan and the other two appeared in front of Li Qianqiu again. Nowadays, most of the ordinary people had never been more than 50 kilometers away from Golden City. Li Mingyuan and the other two scholars were unlucky enough to fall into Li Qianqiu's evil clutches. Chapter 403. Have I seen you guys before? Li Qianqiu was puzzled when he saw the 3 emaciated people in front of him. In his eyes, the people of Great Xia were mostly emaciated. In other words, the aboriginals felt that the people of other races were as skinny as chicks. "General, the 3 of us were the ones who wrote the notice just now," the 3 of them said miserably. "According to what you Great Xia people say, the 3 of you are fated with us." Li Qianqiu was amused. The 3 of them couldn't cry even if they wanted to. Fated my ass. Who wanted to be fated? You guys will set off with us tomorrow to lead the way to Yechi City. Do you know the location? Li Qianqiu asked in a deep voice. Great General, we really don't know. The 3 of them immediately shook their heads. They were supposed to lead the way. It was still reasonable for them to write the notice, but if it was proven that they were supposed to lead the way, the 3 of them would die a horrible death. Everyone in Yechi City would hate the 3 of them to death. The imperial court would definitely execute them to appease the commoners. They might even implicate their families. Oh. Li Qianqiu nodded and casually said, "Take them away and execute them." "General, spare us." The 3 of them broke out in cold sweat. "Take them away and execute them." Li Qianqiu ignored them. Since it was useless, he would just execute them. As for whether they really didn't know or not, he didn't care. "Sir, I will lead the way. I will go and inquire about Yechi City right now." Yao Zhengyan struggled with all his might, but the burly man's hands were like iron pincers that rendered him immobile. His head was full of cold sweat as he shouted. He really hadn't been to Yechi City before, but he couldn't care less now that his life was in danger. "Oh. Behead those 2 and leave this one," Li Qianqiu said coldly. "Sir, I remember now. I have heard of Yechi City and know its approximate location," Li Mingyuan quickly shouted. "Sir, spare us. I remember now too. I can find Yechi City." Su Pingji shouted. What did it mean for a scholar to meet a soldier? This was it. Regardless of what they were thinking, the other party simply ignored them and dragged them away to be beheaded. The 3 of them were really scared after seeing a bloody head in the afternoon. Huh? Li Qianqiu sneered. That was why he hated these scholars. They were full of evil tricks and had no backbone. Night Pawn City was in the vicinity of Golden City, only 1 day away. The 3 of them even beat around the bush when begging for their lives, which made him look down on them. Hang the 3 of them on a pole, and bring them with you tomorrow. If the 3 of them try anything funny, kill them immediately, Li Qianqiu said before leaving. Not long after, 3 pillars were erected in the mansion, each with a person tied to it. The 3 of them were tied to the pillars and exposed to the cold wind. Their hearts were incomparably desolate. Right now they really couldn't call for help from the heavens or the earth. Encountering such a group of death gods, The three of them had no way of dealing with them. If I had known, I wouldn't have entered the city in the morning. Li Mingyuan sighed as he was tied to a pillar. The three of them had stayed at a farmer's house outside the city last night, and rushed into the city early this morning. They didn't expect to encounter such a thing. What do we do next? Su Pingji asked with a dark face. Let's take one step at a time. If we bring them to Night Pond City, I'm afraid the three of us will go down in the history books and bear countless curses, Li Mingyuan lamented. After Li Mingyuan finished speaking, the three of them fell silent. The three of them were well aware of the situation. However, their heads were almost chopped off just now. If we don't lead the way, they will find someone else to lead the way. Yao Xingyin defended himself and the three of them. The three of them could comfort themselves, but the imperial court and the people of Night Pond City wouldn't forgive them for this reason. Early the next morning, Li Qianqiu let the three of them down, and threw them into the group to travel with the rest. No one was afraid that they would escape. It would be a huge joke if these three scholars could escape from their hands. A day later, this army broke into Night Pond City again. Snatching food, snatching food, snatching food. It was a little different from what they had imagined before. Now snatching food had become their main task. Night Pond City was slightly smaller than Golden City. Even though the two warriors who had escaped from Golden City had come to inform them, they still couldn't stop the iron hooves of this army. In the blink of an eye, the city was breached. The only thing that annoyed Li Qianqiu was that many of the wealthy merchants in the city had run away. Within 3 days, 2 cities were suddenly breached by the Dayo army. Great Xia was shaken. Xia Bailong smashed countless cups in one day, spat out blood and collapsed. He didn't need to ask to know what was going on among the people. However, he didn't have the military strength to stop this Dayo army that suddenly appeared. If this continued, he would probably be the only emperor who allowed the enemy army to roam freely in his country during his reign. How could he accept this? Your Majesty, this bird can speak. Ren Baqian carried the birdcage and ran to the Empress's hall excitedly. It wasn't strange for birds to speak. There were many parrots and mynas that could learn to speak. However, this bird was extremely intelligent and seemed to be able to think on its own, which made him feel strange. In the hall, the Empress resumed her life of curling up on the sofa and watching television dramas. When she saw Ren Baqian coming over, she only took a glance at him before returning her gaze to her notebook. When will my wine pool be built? I'm afraid it will take some time, Ren Baqian replied. How many years would it take to fill up a wine pool with more than 600 kilograms of wine? It was better to think of ways to get some food to brew wine himself. Come, give me a smile. Ren Baqian squatted on the sofa, carried the bird cage, and poked the gray clown bird inside with his finger. Smile my ass. Do you think I'm a prostitute who sells smiles? Why would I give you a smile? Can't you take a look at your silly behavior? The clown bird opened its bean-sized eyes and scolded. Ren Baqian's face turned black. This bird wasn't like this when he bought it just now. It was actually quite obedient and cute. Damn it, I've been tricked. Ren Baqian reached into the birdcage, pinched the bird that was flapping its wings and flying around, and exerted force with his thumb and index finger. Click. The entire world became quiet. Ren Baqian threw the cage aside and cursed in his heart. Damn it. Did this silly bird really think that it was a master? The Empress turned her head and looked at him with a smile. I saw it. This bird can indeed talk. Quality education. Nowadays, not only are people's hearts no longer ancient, but even birds' hearts are no longer ancient. Ren Baqian thought about it and felt a little regretful. That bird was actually quite intelligent. Just based on its intelligence, he would definitely be able to train it well if he put a knife to its neck. It was a pity that he didn't have the chance to train it. Forget it, there were many interesting things in this world. Your Majesty, do you want to go out for a walk? Ren Baqian asked the Empress. He had been out of the palace for the past 2 days when he had nothing to do. He first went to the Ministry of Works to discuss the blast furnace and the construction of the cement factory with Tongjinya. After all, the roads would be ready in a few days, and the cement factory had to be expanded first. When the cement factory was completed, everything would be ready, and all that was left was the labor from the Yun nation. Apart from this, he wandered around the city and often saw some interesting things in the hands of some Aboriginal people, especially in the Wuxia district. There were many interesting things in the stalls along the streets. He had just bought this little black bird from one of the Aboriginal people's stalls. No, I still have to finish reading this. The Empress immediately rejected him and looked back at the laptop screen. Chapter 404. For the people in this world, this was the beginning of an ordinary day. However, for a small group of people, this day was a matter of life and death. For example, Yao Jingyan and the other two didn't say anything, but the news of them leading the way for Dayo spread like wildfire. As long as the Dayo people left, the fate of the three of them could be imagined. It was even possible for them to be divided and eaten. As a result, the three of them gritted their teeth and made a decision to rely on Dayo. They didn't ask for an official position, but only wanted to keep them safe. If possible, it would be best to bring their families away. Li Qianqiu rubbed his chin after listening to the three of them. He didn't really care about this matter. It was just three cowards who were greedy for life and afraid of death. As for how to deal with them, he would wait until they returned to Dayo. At most, he would find a place to throw them away. In Dayo's territory, Great Xia wouldn't be able to stir up any trouble. It was fine as long as they could survive. Even if they died, they could only blame it on their bad luck. In addition to these three people, this day was also a matter of life and death for some other people. For example, the students of the Black Bamboo Academy. School reopened today. With dark circles around her eyes, Tong Lan placed her homework into a small cloth bag and let out a long yawn. She hadn't slept for 3 days and 3 nights. However, in any case, she had finished her homework. She was more or less pleased with herself. At least, she would be able to watch those idiots get punished. She was Tong Lan. How could she let those idiots laugh at her? She stood on the back of the fork-horned cow and left the Tong residence. She continued to look like she was fluttering in the wind, but her eyelids were fighting and closed after a while. Halfway through the journey, she lost her balance and fell from the fork-horned cow. She didn't display any of her usual nimble skills at this moment. Her brain seemed to be filled with lead as she fell straight to the ground. She shook her head and got up from the ground. This time, she was more or less awake. She nervously checked if her clothes were dirty before lying on the back of the fork-horned cow, and continued to doze off. Not long after, they arrived at the academy. Tong Lan immediately pretended to be in high spirits, and strode into the academy with dark circles under her eyes. As soon as she entered, she saw Ren Baqian looking at her with a smile on his face. Sinister smile. Tong Lan labeled him in her heart. She snorted through her nose and entered the classroom. Ren Baqian looked at Tong Lan, who had 2 dark circles under her eyes. She was obviously so tired that she was about to fall asleep on the ground, yet she still pretended to be energetic. He found it somewhat funny. This little loli was too fun. Despite his young age, he was extremely competitive and always displayed a prideful look, constantly reminding himself that he was a genius. After watching the little Lolita enter the classroom, Ren Baqian stood at the door for a while. Most of the students came with dark circles under their eyes. However, it was extremely rare to have dark circles like the little lolis. It was like smoky makeup. Those who knew that he was doing homework and staying up all night, but those who didn't would think that he was playing death rock. After all the students had arrived, Ren Baqian strolled back to the classroom and stood on the podium. I'm very happy to see you. Next, someone will be receiving my gentle guidance, Ren Baqian said with a smile as he looked at the room full of dark circles. Hand in your homework first. Those who haven't finished, stand at the door. Everyone looked at each other with complacent smiles on their faces, waiting for the others to stand at the door. No, not a single one. Everyone was sitting there, waiting for the others to stand at the door. This is beyond my expectations. I thought that more than half of the students would stand at the door. Ren Baqian looked down and was a little surprised. Not only was it beyond his expectations, but it was also beyond the expectations of the others. The little Lolita's eyes widened. How was this possible? That bunch of good-for-nothings actually finished their homework? Didn't they ask to borrow homework from her 2 days ago? One had to know that she had done half of it previously, and had to work for 3 days and 3 nights to finish it. How could they possibly finish it? It's still not too late to stand at the door. If I find out that you haven't finished your homework and haven't stood up, you know the consequences, Renbachian reminded them. Still no one stood up. All right, hand in your homework here. I will look at it when I go back tonight. Renbachian nodded. This was indeed a pleasant surprise. In any case, he was very satisfied that this bunch of fellows still knew how to do their homework. Next, he mainly reviewed the content that they had learned previously. He picked a few students to stand up and answer his questions. About half of them answered correctly. Renbachian hadn't seen them for a long time, and was in a good mood. He didn't punish those who answered wrongly. After school, he instructed the students to move the homework away and get ready to go back. Teacher. What's wrong? Renbachian raised his head and asked. I heard that you went to the battlefield? Indeed. Renbachian nodded. How was the battlefield? Wasn't it exciting and made your blood boil? When the topic of the battlefield was brought up, this bunch of students were in high spirits. It was all right. You can go to the slaughterhouse and take a look. It's roughly the same feeling. Renbachian thought for a while and replied. He was somewhat worried on the way to the front line, but when he really arrived, he didn't have much to worry about. However, he had always been well protected and used all kinds of modern weapons to tease the enemies. He had never experienced the kind of close combat that they were looking forward to. They had asked the wrong person. Renbachian left with the homework, and the classroom immediately became lively. Yagüe won't fight with people at the front line. You have asked the wrong person. I heard that he killed many enemies, at least a few thousand. A few thousand? He would have to run even if 3 people came. Don't forget that Yagüe has a gun. I also heard that Yagüe did kill many enemies. I heard that he contributed a lot to this battle. Yagüe usually uses a small gun. He has a big gun that is bigger than a human, and can kill at least a few hundred people in a minute. If he uses that thing, none of you will be able to escape. Is that true? Is it that powerful? That's why I said that you should learn well. You can do it too if you learn Yagüe's skills. How can you finish your homework? Tonglan ignored the discussion of the others, and ran to the 3 students who wanted to borrow homework from her. The 3 of them looked at Tonglan and smiled proudly. That smile made Tonglan want to press them against the wall. Seeing that Tonglan's face was getting darker and darker, they didn't want to provoke her. This little girl would make a move when she was anxious. If she made a move, the 3 of them would be the unlucky ones. It's hard to say. The 7 of us wrote a part each and copied from each other. Tonglan's face turned black when she heard this. She had worked so hard for so long, but they actually wrote a part each and copied from each other. When she thought about how she hadn't slept for 3 days and 3 nights, she immediately grabbed the table and slammed it on the 3 of them. Are you crazy? Bang! Crash! The 3 of them were slammed to the ground. Tonglan dusted her hands and slipped out of the classroom. She went home to sleep. Renbachian leaned against the wall outside. When he saw Tonglan, he smiled and said, That's why it's said that it's very difficult for one person to do things together. You have to learn how to borrow the strength of others. Tonglan raised her head and walked out of the school. Seeing that Tonglan had left, Renbachian returned to the classroom. The students immediately shut up when they saw him. Working together to accomplish something is indeed a good method. However, homework is an exception because it's a way to deepen your knowledge. Remember, the knowledge you learn is the same as your personal strength. It belongs to you and can be used for a lifetime. Money and status could be taken away by others, but these 2 things could not be taken away. Chapter 405. After teaching in school for a few days, Renbachian finally received the medicinal ingredients that the manager of the caravan had sent over. Most of the ingredients were easy to obtain, but there were 2 herbs that weren't available in large quantities. After searching all over Lan City, they only managed to find 6 of them. Next, they had to go to the southwest to purchase more, especially to send people to the 60,000 mountains. That was the base camp of the Aboriginals. In any case, Renbachian could finally continue his training. 7 herbs were enough for him to use for more than a month, and could temporarily solve his urgent need. That night, Renbachian entered the visualization of wood. When he woke up from it, he felt extremely exhausted. He was already used to this feeling, but after resting for 2 months, he wasn't used to this kind of exhaustion. The next morning, Renbachian clenched his fists and finally felt an increase in strength. This feeling of strength growth was really good. However, when he saw Tong Lan in the palace in the afternoon, he immediately felt that the increase in strength was just an illusion. After getting a solid beating from Tong Lan, Renbachian said to Tong Lan with a serious face, "Your grandfather will always be your grandfather." Thump. Renbachian took a solid punch. With dark circles under his eyes, Renbachian continued, "Your teacher will always be your teacher. You must learn to respect your teacher." If the little Lolita snorted and looked at him with disdain. After today's training, Renbachian said to the Empress seriously, "Your Majesty, I think we need to change my opponent." An 8-year-old? The Empress looked at him with a funny expression. Renbachian was at a loss. Wouldn't it be a little too embarrassing if he couldn't even beat an 8-year-old? He absolutely believed that the Empress could find an 8-year-old genius who could beat him up. Why don't I change the palace guards to be my opponent? Renbachian thought about it and gritted his teeth. In any case, the palace guards would still be gentler than Tong Lan. After all, Renbachian still had his status. Furthermore, the palace guards might not be as strong as Tong Lan. Not only were they both at the earth will level, but the things that Tong Lan had learned weren't something that the palace guards could compare to. After all, Tong Zhinya was a spirit will expert and had some tricks up his sleeves. Tong Zhinya's Black Tiger Steel's Heart 13 combo had defeated Qin Chuan several times. Renbachian felt that the Minister of War was better at fighting than the Minister of Works. But in reality, Qin Chuan lost more than he won. "I will change it for you after you defeat Tong Lan." The Empress looked at the change in his expression. Her eyes curved into crescents as if she was laughing in her heart. After a long time, he finally said this. "Your Majesty." Renbachian looked aggrieved. "Work hard to defeat her. It doesn't sound good if you can't even defeat a 10-year-old child," the Empress added. Renbachian felt that the Empress had poured a handful of salt on his wound. This was not only unpleasant to hear, but it was also embarrassing to say it out loud. Forget it, Tong Lan it was. At least there were some benefits to fighting with her. Every time he stood next to her, he was taller than her, so he had a psychological advantage. If it were those burly guards, they wouldn't have any advantage at all. It was still sunny just now. Renbachian sat in the chair beside the Empress and basked in the sun for a while. Then the sky was filled with dark clouds. When Renbachian and the Empress returned to the main hall, it began to rain heavily. Bean-sized raindrops smashed on the tiles and the ground, making pitter-patter sounds. "Your Majesty, do you want to eat hot pot tonight?" Renbachian turned his head and asked after looking at the rain outside. "Sure." The Empress nodded. She couldn't get enough of hot pot. Before the sky turned dark, the guards brought the ingredients for hot pot in the rain. Renbachian and the Empress listened to the sound of the rain in the main hall. In front of them was a steaming hot pot, which felt very good. Renbachian poured wine for both of them, raised his cup to the Empress, and downed it. "Those people in the south are always dishonest. I just killed a group of them and recently, I discovered that they are secretly colluding," the Empress said faintly as she drank the wine. He didn't know when she developed this habit of always talking about things while eating. "Oh." Renbachian nodded. This kind of thing had never stopped, but it became more serious after the war with Great Xia. "What do you think?" the Empress asked faintly. "I will make a trip there," Renbachian said after thinking for a while. "After all, it will take some time to settle these things. Just treat it as preparation for the Yun nation. However, it will be a pity that I won't be able to accompany your Majesty. In that case, you don't have to feel regretful. I will make a trip there too," the Empress said faintly. "Your Majesty, you are going too?" Renbachian was slightly surprised as he didn't expect the Empress to actually go there. I want to see why they are still not satisfied after the imperial court has given them a peaceful life for decades, the Empress said. She was already tired of those people's petty tricks. If she hadn't promised them, she would have killed them long ago. Now that she was going there to settle things, she wanted to see what those people were like, what kind of life they were living, and whether the imperial court had mistreated them. What about the imperial court? Renbachian asked. Previously, she went to the north because of the war, and it was an urgent matter. Now that the war had stabilized, it didn't seem appropriate for the Empress to abandon the imperial court and run to the south. With the elders and the radio station around, there won't be any delays, the Empress said indifferently. In that case, I still have to bring my students along. I'm afraid this trip will take some time, Renbachian continued. Oh yes, Your Majesty. Do you want to read your palm? I learned it from an old man when I was young, Renbachian asked. Read your palm. Everyone's palm is different. You can tell a person's fate by reading their palm. This is a skill that has been passed down for thousands of years, Renbachian explained. How do you read it? The Empress's curiosity was piqued by his words. Your Majesty, give me your hand. As Renbachian spoke, he held the Empress's hand and opened it. Then he used his other hand to touch her palm and squinted his eyes. He touched it once, then again and again. The Empress's face was full of anticipation, and her eyebrows were raised, and her eyes were cold. Renbachian coughed and said, In terms of fate, Your Majesty was born rich and noble. You are at the top of the world and have the fate of the human emperor. In terms of marriage, Your Majesty is already married without any twists and turns, and you will live to a ripe old age together. The Empress continued to look cold. She felt that she had been deceived by this guy in front of her. In terms of fortune, Your Majesty's fortune is unparalleled, and you are sitting on the wealth of the world. Although your fortune isn't considered good at the moment, this year is your lucky year. From this year onwards, Your Majesty's fortune will gradually increase, and you will be the wealthiest in the world. In terms of children, Your Majesty has 12 children. Slap. The Empress's ears turned red, and she looked at Renbachian coldly. 12 children. Have 12 children? Just thinking about it was scary. Furthermore, it was difficult for the Aboriginals to have children. It was considered good for an average family to have 3 to 5 children. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so few Aboriginals. At her level, it was even more difficult to have children. This bastard was indeed deceiving her. Renbachian shook his hand with all his might, and his face was twitching. Yes, I have 12 children. Renbachian took a deep breath and said, Slap. The Empress's phoenix eyes widened. If she didn't have 12 children, then whose? Chapter 406. It was nighttime. Dark clouds covered the moon. Yin Nation outside Qingfeng City. More than 20 people appeared not far from the city, and looked at the city wall with torches in the distance. The leader was a huge man who looked like a small giant, and carried 2 double-edged axes on his back. He was the one who led the attack on the 7th Prince of Great Xia. This time, he was still the leader of the operation to exterminate the Yin Nation's Guoqing warlord and his family. The Department of Inspection was mainly in charge of covert matters. Among them, there was a department in charge of investigation, but this department seemed to exist in name only. Rather than investigating in secret, the Aboriginals might as well kidnap people and interrogate them. The other department was in charge of killing. However, the Empress was straightforward and would behead anyone she didn't like. As a result, they rarely had to do anything. On the contrary, they had to be mobilized twice in a year. Apart from practicing martial arts every day, they had nothing else to do. Her Majesty finally remembered them. There were only about 100 people in the Department of Inspection, and the weakest among them was at the earthwill level. However, unlike the winged cavalry, who were good at charging and breaking through enemy lines, the people of the Department of Inspection were better at one-on-one combat, just like the practitioners of Great Xia. There isn't even a moon. It's a good time to kill people at night. Sir, when do we enter the city? Someone behind him asked in the dark. Do it quickly. Her Majesty said to exterminate his entire family, so we can't let anyone escape. Also, don't forget to ask for the location of the treasury. Hong Bao waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Subsequently, the group approached the city under the cover of the night, and sneaked into the city while the guards were patrolling. At this time, it was already the hour of the sea. For people in this world who worked at sunrise and rested at sunset, it was already time to rest. However, there were also a few drunkards who rarely sought pleasure in the red light districts and willow alleys. They walked in the city at night, reeking of alcohol. The group chose dark and remote places to walk. After climbing over a wall, Hong Bao felt that something was wrong below. It seemed that someone was leaning against the wall and vomiting. Hong Bao adjusted his posture in midair, and stepped down with both feet on the back of the person supporting the wall. With the weight of Hong Bao's huge body and the two huge axes on his back, the person under his feet stopped moving after making contact with the ground with a kacha sound. There were originally two people in the alley. One of them was vomiting, and the other was also drunk. In the end, a burly man suddenly descended from the sky and stepped on one of them. The other person was instantly stunned. His vision became clearer, and he opened his mouth and wanted to shout. However, Hong Bao's huge palm pressed his face against the wall, and his head was smashed like a smashed watermelon. Behind Hong Bao, more than 20 black shadows flipped over and landed on the ground with a dull thud. Pa! Only one person's voice was different from the others. Everyone turned to look at him. In the dim light, they could see a puddle of fresh vomit at his feet. As his feet landed on the ground, it splashed onto the others. The eyes of the surrounding people were overflowing with killing intent. Only that person had an innocent look on his face as he shrugged. Capture someone and ask him where the City Lord Mansion is. Hong Bao's voice made everyone restrain their urge to let him know why the flowers were so red. After all, the mission was more important. As the figures left, there was a dull sound of bodies colliding with each other in the alley. After a while, they arrived at a huge mansion. Kill them all. Remember to leave a few important people alive to ask about the location of the treasure house. Hong Bao waved his hand. Everyone drew their weapons and jumped over the wall into the courtyard. A few people on night patrol didn't have time to react, and were beheaded by a figure who suddenly appeared from the dark. The sound of blood splattering and bodies falling alarmed people in the distance. Who is it? What's that sound? A few figures silently rushed in the direction of the sound, while the others scattered in all directions. Who is it? Ah! The miserable howl of the person who asked the question before he died alarmed the people in the mansion. Many people rushed out and were greeted by all kinds of weapons. What happened? Yi Ku, the warlord of Qingfeng City, heard the commotion outside and asked in a low voice. "Sir, it seems like there are assassins." Oh. Yi Ku nodded and didn't pay much attention to it. He had done too many things in his lifetime, and there were too many people who wanted to seek revenge on him. However, he was still safe and sound here. He was still confident in the defense of the mansion. In addition to the ordinary guards, there were dozens of man-will experts and 7 earth-will experts. This kind of strength was comparable to some of the middle-level aristocratic families in Great Xia. Until now, no one had been able to break through the defense to his side. Most of the assassins didn't even get to see his face before they were skinned and hung on the city wall. In his opinion, the assassination this time would be the same as the previous ones, and would be resolved very quickly. Even though the miserable screams of the guards before they died were getting closer and closer. Aboriginals? Why are you guys here? 2 earth-will experts appeared and blocked the way of the advancing crowd. When they saw figures that were much larger than ordinary people walking out of the darkness, they immediately exclaimed. 1, 2, 3. Just from what they could see, there were already 7 or 8 people, and there were still miserable screams coming from afar. At the very least, they were aboriginals. A life for a life, a debt to be repaid. A burly man holding a mace revealed his white teeth in the darkness. He looked like a wild beast and was full of malevolence. Kill! That burly man roared, jumped more than 10 meters, and smashed his mace. Just by looking at the power of the mace, the 2 earth-wheel experts were horrified and didn't dare to block it. Boom! The mace smashed into the ground, and the flagstones below turned into countless gravel that flew in all directions. Although the two experts dodged the mace, they felt a chill in their hearts when they saw the other figures that jumped over. Earthwill experts. They were all Earthwill experts. The two of them immediately thought of the incident that happened in the city a month ago. They didn't expect this group of aboriginals to be so vengeful that they didn't care about the war, and directly sneaked into the Yun Nation, just for that seemingly trivial incident. The two of them were filled with regret. If they had known this would happen, they would have stopped Yiku on that day. At the very least, they would have taken their leave. "Let's talk this out," the two shouted. The others simply ignored their words and silently brandished their weapons. Each of them was full of murderous intent. Kill them all, leave no one alive. Seeing that the other party wasn't going to show any mercy, the two hurriedly shouted for the other experts. "Who dares to behave atrociously in the warlord's residence?" A loud shout came from outside the warlord's residence. When the three experts heard the shout for help, they immediately emerged from the residences around the warlord's residence. In a few flashes, they appeared inside the warlord's residence. However, as soon as their feet touched the ground, they were surrounded by 5 huge figures. Aboriginals. The 3 of them were shocked when they saw the people around them. "Warlord, it's bad. The Aboriginals are attacking." Hearing the screams coming from the courtyard, Yiku jumped out of his bed and asked, "What's going on?" "It's the Aboriginals. They are all Earthwill experts. We can't stop them. Both Chi and you are dead." Yiku's face turned green when he heard this. He didn't need to think to know why the Aboriginals were here. The reason he dared to rob the Aboriginal caravan was that the Aboriginals were at war with Great Xia, and Great Xia was the most powerful country in the world. So what if he robbed the Aboriginal caravan? It wasn't like those barbarians would come looking for him. Great Xia and the Yun Nation had already made their move. It would be good if the Aboriginals weren't destroyed. However, he didn't expect Great Xia to be defeated so quickly. His image of Great Xia, which was the most powerful country in his heart, suddenly collapsed. However, he wasn't too worried. There was still the Yun Nation's army ahead, and the other party couldn't do anything to him. However, he didn't expect the Aboriginals to sneak into the Yun Nation so quickly and ruthlessly to seek revenge. Barbarians. They were indeed barbarians. They didn't even see the big picture. There was still a war ahead, and they actually came to seek revenge over such a small matter. However, it was useless to scold them now. Since they couldn't stop them in front, it was more important to escape. "Master, what should we do?" the concubine on the bed asked with a pale face. Although she didn't know how powerful the Aboriginals were, she knew about them. Furthermore, they couldn't be stopped in front now. What should she do? Yiku's face was ashen. Without saying a word, he put on his clothes and smashed through the window behind him. The barbarians were coming from ahead, and it was too dangerous. As long as he ran out of the residence and hid in the barracks, he would be safe. As for his concubines, he would marry a few more later. If the old didn't go, the new wouldn't come. Even if his son died, he could just go back and give birth again, not to mention his concubines. "Master!" A cry came from behind, but Yiku didn't even turn his head. However, he didn't run far before he heard a blood-curdling scream in front of him. Not only in the front courtyard but also in the back courtyard. "How many of those barbarians are here?" Yiku's face turned even paler. He regretted it now. However, it was useless to regret. The problem now was where to run. Yiku was sweating all over as he looked around in the dark. Finally, his eyes lit up as he saw an old water tank under the eaves not far away. That place was a little remote and unnoticeable. If he ran around now, he might run into those barbarians. It was better to hide here. A massacre in the middle of the night. When the guards in the city discovered that the warlord's residence was being attacked, they immediately sent soldiers to rescue them. However, they were stopped outside by 7 or 8 people. In the city, it was still a pitch-black night. To the ordinary soldiers, 7 or 8 Aboriginal experts were like 7 or 8 gods of death as they killed their way into the crowd. The 1,000 people who came as reinforcements were killed in less than 15 minutes and fled in all directions. At this time, in the warlord's residence, Hongbao stood in the room where Yiku had been previously. That concubine was curled up on the bed and shivering. Hongbao lifted the blanket and revealed a fair body. Her skin is even more tender than the ladies in the brothels. Hong Bao was a little envious. Sir, please spare my life. Sir, please spare my life. I will do anything you want me to do. The concubine didn't cover her body and just knelt on the bed and begged for mercy. Her Majesty said not to leave even a chicken or dog alive. Hong Bao was a little regretful. He slapped the concubine's head, and fresh blood immediately spurted out. Search. That bastard warlord was named by Her Majesty. We must find him. Hong Bao ordered the people behind him. The 7 or 8 people behind him scattered in all directions. Meanwhile, the massacre in the distance was still going on. Hong Bao sat in the room with a big saber and a big horse. Even when the sky was about to brighten, there wasn't a single living person in the entire warlord's residence. However, the warlord was still nowhere to be found. Have you found the location of the treasury? Yes, it's in the back courtyard. The rest of you continue to search. Let's go to the treasury first. Sir, the soldiers from the barracks in the city should be rushing over soon, someone said. Killing 2 batches of guards previously had bought them some time. However, the sky was about to brighten, and the soldiers from the barracks were probably not far from here. Lead the way. Half of you will follow me to the treasury. Hong Bao suddenly remembered something. Who knows how to write? The people behind him looked at each other. It was still difficult for them to recognize a bunch of words, but it was really difficult for them to write them. The last person took a step forward and said proudly, Sir, I know how to write. Find a conspicuous place and write this on him. A life for a life, a debt to be repaid. Murder your grandpa. This is called a justifiable attack, Hong Bao said softly. These words were specially instructed by Principal Run over the radio. We will do our best, the burly man said as he patted his chest. Following which, he went to the main hall of the residence and dragged 2 corpses over. He pondered for a long time before gesturing on the ground for a long time. Then, he raised his head and saw that the sky was already bright. He hesitated for a while before writing a few bloody words on the wall. Murder XX, a debt to be repaid X. Murder your grandpa. Chapter 407. That's all. Hong Bao walked around the so-called treasury with an ugly expression. There were more than 10 boxes of silver, some weapons and armors that looked impressive, and 1 box contained crystal cups and an extremely beautiful mirror. The bronze mirrors couldn't be compared to them at all. The most valuable thing here was this box of crystal cups and mirrors. However, he was the warlord of the Yun Nation, and the Yun Nation was famous for being extremely wealthy. How could this be all he had? There was only one possibility. This was only a treasury on the surface, and there was definitely another place to store the truly precious items. Sir, what should we do? Move them away. Move these away. Hong Bao pointed at the box containing the glass cups and mirrors. Even if he didn't understand, he could tell that these things were much more valuable than the silver. Set a fire and burn everything. We'll come back again after they dig out the real treasury, Hong Bao said as he rubbed his chin. Since they couldn't find the treasury, they would burn everything here. Perhaps the treasury would be exposed. He would wait outside the city for a day, and come back again after this place was burned to the ground to see if there were any traces of the treasury. We haven't found the warlord yet. He can run, but he can't run away from the city. His roots are here, so he can't leave. It's almost daybreak. Set a fire first before evacuating. Fill up the wells and break everything that can hold water. They won't be able to put out the fire. Yes. After that, everyone split up. Some set fires everywhere, while others filled up the wells. At the same time, they broke everything that could hold water to put out the fire. For example, the buckets and water tanks in the courtyard. 1, 2, 3. When one of the water tanks was broken, a person fell out. The person who broke the water tank was stunned. The person in the water tank rolled on the ground and ran away. That person was naturally Yi Ku. The screams outside were long gone, and only the sound of heavy footsteps could be heard. It was self-evident what this meant. Everyone in the residence was dead, including his 22 concubines and his children. Yi Ku was scared out of his wits. He cursed the useless guards in his heart as he carefully hid and waited for the barbarians to leave before escaping. However, he couldn't hide now. After the aboriginal warrior who broke the water jar recovered from his shock, he sneered, drew out the sword from his back, and threw it at that person. Then he walked over and stepped on his body to pull out the knife. After wiping it with his clothes, he suddenly thought of something. This person's physique seemed to be that of the city lord who had yet to be found? It couldn't be him, right? That aboriginal warrior was elated. This was truly a pie that fell from the sky. Are you the city lord? The aboriginal warrior asked after seeing that he was still breathing after flipping him over. Yiku was vomiting blood like a crab. The stab just now had pierced through his lung. Is that so? Pa. A slap in the face. Is it true or not? Pa. Another slap. Answer me. Is it true or not? Pa 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 pa. Are you still breathing? Out of breath? Forget it. Bringing your head back will be a great merit. Seeing that the aboriginal soldier was no longer breathing, the aboriginal soldier chopped off his head. Regardless of whether you are the city lord or not, I'll take it as you are. Boss, I brought the city lord's head back. Is this it? Then he excitedly ran to find a red packet to present. Hong Bao stood in the courtyard and looked at the head that his subordinate brought over. The face was so deformed that even his mother wouldn't be able to recognize it, let alone Hong Bao. Where's the corpse? It's there. I'll bring it over. After a while, the guard brought the corpse over again. It was very dirty, but from the physique, it looked similar. Didn't you ask where the treasury is? Oh, I forgot. Forget it. I'll remember your merit. Hong Bao waved his hand. In any case, he had snatched a box of treasures. As for the real treasury, now that the city lord and his family were all dead, he wasn't sure if the guards could dig it out. He would wait for 2 days and see. Even if they couldn't find the real treasury, those crystal cups and mirrors should be worth a lot of money. It would be a small merit to hand them over to Her Majesty. By the time the surrounding flames were set ablaze, the guards in the city had also arrived. Let's go and kill our way out. If Ren Baqian knew that this group of people had snatched those useless glass cups and mirrors back, he wondered what kind of expression he would have. At this moment he was on Earth. He tidied himself up and prepared to leave. Today's matter was a little special. He had to meet someone. A very special person. Qi Jieyu. To be honest, he didn't know how to treat this woman who looked 80% like the Empress. If he didn't guess wrongly, Qi Jieyu was probably the Empress from Earth. They were two different people, but in some aspects, they were actually the same person. Otherwise, that trace of the Empress's soul wouldn't have had such a reaction when she saw her. Just like when he met the 7th prince. Ren Baqian felt that this situation was a little tricky and didn't know how to deal with it. Ignore her? However, the thought of the Empress's soul at that time was like burying a thorn in his heart. Kill her? From a certain point of view, this was the best solution. He didn't feel guilty at all for killing an innocent person. He had already killed hundreds and thousands of people, so why would he care about an ordinary person? However, she was, after all, the Empress of this world. This identity made it a little difficult for him to kill her. Therefore, after thinking for a few days, he finally contacted Shenfeng to meet her. The method was very simple. He asked Shenfeng to look for their teaching assistant and say that a certain company was recruiting a few interns. Those who wanted to apply had to submit their resumes. Then he just had to see if her name was on the resume. If she wasn't, he would think of other ways. This matter was easily settled, and today's appointment was made. Ren Baqian drove to a cafe in Shanghai and found a seat to sit down. After waiting in the cafe for about 20 minutes, he saw a young woman walk to the door through the window. She was wearing a floral skirt and a white lace shirt. She looked youthful and a little charming. When he saw her, his murderous intent began to rise. It's her. Ren Baqian immediately knew that the person in question had arrived. Then his phone rang. Hello, is this Mr. Ren? Table 16, I can already see you, Ren Baqian said faintly. Qi Jieyu pushed the door open and looked around. After asking the waiter, she was led to Ren Baqian by the waiter. Hello. Qi Jieyu said first, then was a little surprised when she saw Renbachian's appearance. "It's you. Take a seat," Renbachian said faintly. "Are you that stalker from last time? Why did you beat around the bush and spent so much effort to trick me here? Don't tell me you want to woo me? Do you know that your behavior is very annoying? Although it seems like you put in a lot of effort. But I'm sorry, I'm a good person. I should find someone better." After Qi Jieyu recovered from her surprise, she opened her mouth and said a series of words. Renbachian was speechless. What was going on? Renbachian was puzzled as he watched Qi Jieyu turn around and walk away after saying a bunch of words. What did she say? What was going on? Chapter 408. Being humiliated. This was the first time Renbachian had such an experience. For a moment, even the killing intent in his mind dissipated. His head was full of question marks. After sitting in the same spot for a while, Renbachian couldn't help but laugh. He wasn't embarrassed or angry because he didn't have those thoughts in the first place. Therefore, this development made him feel very amused. It was also a pity. He wanted to talk to her before deciding what to do with her. Renbachian even considered keeping her as his mistress. 1 million a year? 10 million? Money didn't mean much to him. Keeping such a small empress might come in handy in the future. He wouldn't touch her as long as no one else touched her. Unfortunately, she ruined this opportunity. He ruined his own path. Since the other party wasn't willing to talk, there was no need to talk. It was better to kill her. Renbachian threw the money on the table and walked out of the cafe with a smile. Qi Jieyu was nowhere to be seen. Renbachian drove to the entrance of SH University, found a place where he could see the whole gate, and parked his car there. He leaned back slightly and played an old song on his phone. Trouble Caused by the Moon. Listening to the familiar tune, Renbachian gently shook his legs, took out his pistol with one hand, wiped it with a piece of paper, and put it back on his waist. He then adjusted his seat and leaned back. After waiting for about 2 hours, Renbachian saw a figure wearing a flowery skirt and a white lace shirt appear at the school gate. "It's all your fault, trouble caused by the moon." Renbachian hummed a tune as he opened the door and got out of the car. He put his hands in his pockets and walked toward the school gate. Should I use a gun or my hands? Renbachian thought to himself as he walked. The sound of a gun would be too loud, so he should use his hands. However, when he was about to cross the road, he was suddenly stopped by someone. "Mr. Ren." Renbachian tilted his head and looked at the 3 people who stopped him. There was a familiar smell on them. It was the smell of people from the country. They came so quickly. Had they been following him? Did they know what he was going to do? "Mr. Ren, our minister wants to talk to you." One of them took out his phone and dialed the number before putting it by Renbachian's ear. "Mr. Ren, remember what you promised the country." Yang Sen's voice came from the other end of the phone. "What?" Renbachian asked. "You promised the country that you wouldn't kill anyone. I hope you keep your word. You are an extraordinary person, and it is not worth ruining your reputation for such a small matter. I also do not wish for anything to affect our cooperation," Yang Sen warned. "No matter what, we don't want to see that kid called Qi Jieyu get hurt. No matter what, we don't want to see that child named Qi Jieyu get hurt. She's just an ordinary person. Although she looks like that person, she's just an ordinary girl in today's society. She doesn't belong to the same world as Mr. Ren." Renbachian smiled. Renbachian smiled and said, "It won't affect you if I provide for her, right? This was a consensual thing. Although it's against social customs, it's not your business. I hope Mr. Ren means what you say. If you have time, it would be best for Mr. Ren to come to the laboratory. Recently, there have been some results that Mr. Ren might be interested in." After Yang Sen finished his warning, he once again brought up the matter of cooperation between the 2 parties. I mean Yang he, was. Renbachian didn't answer and handed the phone back to her. "Goodbye." Renbachian waved at the 3 of them and continued walking toward the school gate. How could he possibly turn around and leave in this kind of situation? Didn't that mean that Yang Sun guessed correctly? He couldn't possibly make it clear that he really wanted to kill someone, right? He would lose face. In the Jianghu, he had to keep his word. Since he said that he would not kill anyone, he could not let the other party have a hold on him. Ren Baqian felt that he was quite a moral person. As Ren Baqian strode into the university gate, he felt that the 3 pairs of eyes were still watching him from behind. When Qi Jieyu heard the footsteps behind her, she looked back. A trace of shock and disgust flashed in her eyes. She said in a loud voice, "I won't steal your boyfriend. That Lu Zhongliang just likes me. You can't control your own man. Don't bother me, okay?" As soon as he said that, the surrounding people heard it clearly. One by one, they stood to the side and looked at the 2 of them as if they had been injected with chicken blood. A man and a woman fighting over a man. This was much more exciting than 2 women fighting over a man. Ren Baqian. He had been hitting the goose for a long time, but in the end, the goose had pecked his eyes. Ren Baqian cheated people every day. Unexpectedly, there would be a day when he would be cheated by someone else. Ren Baqian reconsidered whether he should shoot her now. "Follow me to the State Security Department." Ren Baqian rummaged through his pocket for a long time and found his identification. He had specially brought it with him today. "I have a special poor certificate, single certificate, and FFF certificate. Do you want to take a look?" Qi Jieyu looked disgusted. Nowadays, what kind of identification couldn't be made online? Did he think that she was a fool? "This thing might be able to prove my identity." Ren Baqian took out a gun from the back of his waist. The surrounding students were shocked. Qi Jieyu was also shocked. Following which, anger flashed in her eyes. This guy was getting more and more overboard. This was SH University. What was he trying to do with a fake gun? Bang! Without waiting for Qi Jieyu to speak, Ren Baqian suddenly fired a shot at the ground. The sound of the gunshot resounded in the campus. This time, the surrounding people were immediately shocked. This was a real gun. The man in front of them was really holding a gun. "Oh, I'm really sorry. It was a misfire. I still have to write a self-reflection when I go back. I reckon that I will also be punished." Ren Baqian revealed a face of surprise. It was as if he had really misfired. As Ren Baqian spoke, he removed the magazine and stuffed it into his pocket. He flashed his identification to the surrounding people and said, "The State Security Department has a matter that requires this student's assistance in investigating. I'm very sorry for the misfire just now. I hope it didn't affect anyone." After hearing what he said, the surrounding students' terrified expressions finally eased. "You can inform the police and the school to confirm my identity." Ren Baqian then said to Qi Jieyu, "If that's the case, the impact will be greater. So many people saw me, and the surveillance cameras captured my figure. You don't have to worry about your safety. My identity can't be faked. Then we'll wait for the police to come." Qi Jieyu wasn't moved at all. Motherf asterisk Ker. Ren Baqian thought to himself. This Qi Jieyu was really vigilant. "Mr. Ren." The 3 people came in front of Ren Baqian again. "Our team is handling matters. You'd better not interfere." Ren Baqian warned them. The 3 of them looked at each other. Although Ren Baqian's act of shooting was rather vile, he dealt with it in time. He explained that it was a misfire, and even lied that he would be punished when he returned. This managed to suppress the majority of the matter. With his identity, the current situation was still tolerable. After all, Ren Baqian's identification was real. In terms of identity, he could really be considered as a member of a certain department in the state. "You'd better give our department head an explanation. The current situation is different from what you said." "I'll submit the report. Now, I have some matters to discuss with this student." Ren Baqian nodded. The appearance of these 3 people and Ren Baqian's words made the other students believe most of it. One by one, they revealed looks of surprise. So, there really was a secret department. They wondered if there was a dragon group or something. Even Qi Jieyu started to be dubious. She carefully sized up these 3 people, trying to determine if they were actually hired by this guy. Previously, even the teaching assistant was deceived. She actually helped him recruit people in the class. Otherwise, how could the current situation have happened? 5 minutes later, the police arrived at the scene. What happened? He has a gun. Chi Jiayu pointed at Ren Baqian and hid behind the police. Ren Baqian ignored her small movements and handed his identification to the police. I need this student's help with something. This is my identification. You can verify it. When the police verified Ren Baqian's identity, the surrounding people finally confirmed it as well. Please come with me, student. Ren Baqian pointed at Chi Jiayu. I'm sorry, I thought you were a stalker. I had such an experience when I was young. If the police hadn't arrived in time, I'm afraid. Since then, I've been very afraid of strangers. Chi Jiayu looked apologetic and pitiful. Ren Baqian looked at her performance. She vividly portrayed the fear, caution, and apology of a little rabbit in danger. He felt that the Oscars really owed her a Best Actress award. Chapter 409. Why exactly are you looking for me? Chi Jiayu looked a little perturbed as they sat in Ren Baqian's car. For a second-year student, the country's secret organization meant too much, and she couldn't stay calm. Ren Baqian turned to look at her and suppressed the murderous intent in his heart. He would have this reaction every time he saw her. Previously, he thought of keeping her as his mistress, but now that he thought about it, it didn't make sense. What was the point of keeping someone he wanted to kill every time he saw her? To hone his temperament? This was a good idea. The more he experienced, the more murderous he became. Perhaps he was influenced by the company he kept. After interacting with the Empress and those soldiers who faced death, it was inevitable that he would be influenced by them. There were also some things that were suppressed and hidden in his nature that began to take root and sprout when the thread of moral restraint was broken. All these factors resulted in his current character. Sometimes he was very peaceful and sometimes kind, but sometimes he would want to kill someone because he didn't like them or because of some trivial matters. Do you know this person? Ren Baqian took out his phone and showed Chi Jiayu a photo. In the photo was a bald, fierce-looking man with crisscross scars on his upper body. The background was a dense forest. Just by looking at the person in the photo, one could feel the ferocious aura coming from him. I don't know. Chi Jiayu shook her head. Of course, Ren Baqian knew that she didn't know him. This photo was taken by Li Qianqiu. If she knew him, it would be a big deal. What about this? Ren Baqian showed another photo. It was a photo of a girl dozing off tied to the back of a cow. The background was also the wilderness. I don't know them either. Chi Jiayu was at a loss and didn't know what Ren Baqian meant. Remember these two people. If you see them, contact me, Ren Baqian said as he put away his phone. Oh, Chi Jiayu didn't understand, but still nodded. She didn't know why Ren Baqian thought that she would meet these two people. Of course not. Ren Baqian was just looking for an excuse. After all, he couldn't just tell her nothing after getting her into the car, right? You will meet them. You don't need to know the specifics. Just call me and tell me when the time comes. On one hand, he had to suppress the killing intent in his heart. On the other hand, he had to fabricate a lie. Even though lying had become a habit for him, he was still a little annoyed. What annoyed him even more was this person's appearance. You may leave. As for the others who ask, Ren Baqian muttered to himself for a while. He could imagine that some people would definitely look for her and ask what he had said after he left. Just say. Ren Baqian suddenly turned his head and asked, Is 10 million yuan enough to support you? Ha. I'm sorry, I'm a good person. I should have found someone better. Chi Jiayu subconsciously said. Yes, that's what I said. If they ask, just tell them about it. Although they are in the same department as me, they are not in the same group. The meaning of these words is clear to all of us. It means that you are my chosen one. The photos and related words I showed you earlier, you have to keep them to yourself. Before the matter is resolved, you can't tell anyone. You should know the significance of the secret department's work. Don't cause trouble for yourself, and don't cause trouble for me. Ren Baqian waved his hand. That's it. Remember to say that. Oh, Chi Jiayu was still in a daze. She had no idea what was going on. Why do I have to do all this? Chi Jiayu finally thought of asking a question. You don't have the right to refuse. Furthermore, once you're done, I will help you apply for funding for your informant activities. After Renbachyan drove away, she stood in the parking lot and stared blankly for a long time. If someone really wanted to support her with 10 million yuan, would she agree? 10 million yuan. She wouldn't be able to earn that much even if she worked for a lifetime. It was tempting to think about it. Unfortunately, this wasn't true. This is student Qi Jieyu, right? I have a few questions to ask you. 3 men walked in front of Qi Jieyu. They were the 3 men in the campus just now. They seemed to know Renbachyan and were from the same department. Qi Jieyu recognized them at a glance. What's the matter? What did Mr. Ren say to you just now? One of them asked. Qi Jieyu immediately recalled what Renbachyan said just now. With a shy look on her face, she said, "He asked me if I could support him with 10 million yuan. How did you answer?" "I'm sorry, I'm a good person. I should find someone better," Qi Jieyu said. The 3 men looked at Qi Jieyu. This kind of hair clip was really rare. What else did he say? He didn't say anything and just let me out of the car. If you encounter any problems in the future, you can call this number. One of the men took out a pen and a notebook, wrote a line of phone number on it, and handed it to Qi Jieyu. What does that mean? It means that if you encounter any danger or trouble in the future, you can call this number. I will encounter danger? Qi Jieyu was surprised. People will always encounter danger. You can even be knocked down by a car on the road. The man said something ambiguous. Sorry to disturb you. After the 3 men left, Qi Jieyu held the piece of paper with the phone number and thought about the 2 photos Renbachyan showed her. He said that she would encounter these 2 people, and these people said that she would encounter danger. What did they mean? Were these 2 people very dangerous? After Renbachyan left Qi Jieyu, the murderous intent in his heart gradually subsided. This feeling of wanting to kill someone but having no choice but to suppress it was uncomfortable. He gave his family a call and chatted for a while before he finally calmed down. Now his family had already accepted the situation of not being able to see him all year round. However, they were still concerned about his marriage. Every time they called, they didn't forget to ask when they would bring the girl back to see her. Renbachyan's mind was filled with the idea of bringing this imposter back to let his parents meet her. However, he gave up on this idea as soon as it appeared. If the Empress met his parents in the future and found out from them that he brought a girl like her back, he reckoned that he would be out of luck. For the next 2 days, he stayed in the villa in a daze. Although Yang-sun said that there was progress in his research, he wasn't in the mood to go over now. After staying in the villa for 2 days, he brought a batch of radio stations, walkie-talkies, batteries, and solar panels back to the other world. These things were still very lacking in the other world. Before technology was developed, the first thing to do was to popularize instant communication. After leaving Pingle Park, he went to see the Empress. Looking at the already half-empty candy tree in the main hall, Renbachyan felt that if the aboriginals weren't physically strong, the Empress would have a toothache sooner or later based on the way she ate candy. Fortunately, the Empress's body was extremely strong, and even ordinary swords couldn't injure her. If the Empress had a toothache, it would be much more dangerous to treat her than a crocodile. After boiling the cotton candy for half a day, the candy tree was filled with them. Renbachyan took 2 large cotton candy, sat on the sofa, and passed one to the Empress. These days, I saw someone who looked very similar to your Majesty. I almost mistook her for someone else. This world is really wonderful. There's actually someone who looks so similar to your Majesty. Renbachyan took a bite of the cotton candy and smiled. Oh, in that case, I want to see if they really look alike, the Empress said with great interest. The next time we go back, your Majesty, come with me to take a look. Renbachyan smiled. After a few minutes, Renbachyan discovered something strange. The Empress actually stopped eating after taking a bite of the cotton candy. She was sitting there quietly watching a television series. With the Empress's love for sweets, this kind of thing was really rare. Why aren't you eating, your Majesty? The Empress turned her head and looked at Renbachyan. After a while she slowly said, I don't know why, but I have a toothache. I'm not in the mood to eat. When the Empress felt pain, she wouldn't look as delicate and pitiful as an ordinary girl. Therefore, even if she didn't say anything, it was very hard for others to notice. Chapter 410. The Empress actually had a toothache. This was a serious matter. Could it really be a toothache caused by eating sweets? Ren Baqian wasn't sure. Previously, he was just thinking about it. Was there a need to be so accurate? The Empress's skin was impervious to even swords and knives, yet she actually had a toothache. Ren Baqian found it hard to believe. Your Majesty, why don't you open your mouth and let me take a look? Ren Baqian asked. The Empress rolled her eyes at him. How was it possible to open her mouth and let him take a look? She would never agree to this kind of thing. It doesn't matter, the Empress said faintly. A toothache isn't an illness, but it can kill you. If you really have a toothache, I'm afraid you will have to eat less sweets in the future, Ren Baqian advised. Upon hearing that, the Empress raised her eyebrows and looked at Ren Baqian with slanted eyes. She looked as if she would beat him up if he didn't explain himself. Your Majesty, if you eat sweets when you have a toothache, it will easily cause periodontal disease. Ren Baqian looked at the Empress and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I already said it doesn't matter. The Empress ignored him. Why don't we get the doctor to take a look? Ren Baqian asked. No matter what, since she was sick, she had to be treated. She couldn't possibly be stubborn. Hongwuan, get the doctor to say that I have a toothache. The Empress thought for a while and said to the people behind her. Not long after, the people from the doctor's office came to the hall. There were 3 of them, and they were all very old. It seemed that the older the doctors were, the more experienced they were. This was the case no matter which world they were in. After the few of them greeted each other, one of them came forward to take the Empress's pulse. Ren Baqian couldn't help but interrupt. A toothache, can you tell by taking a pulse? Noisy. The Empress glared at him, and he had no choice but to shut up. Where does your Majesty have a toothache? The Empress pointed at her cheek. May I trouble your Majesty to open your mouth and let me take a look at your teeth? The doctor said after taking the Empress's pulse. I'm fine, all of you can leave. The Empress waved her hand. Your Majesty. Ren Baqian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Wasn't it just taking a look at her teeth? Why was it so difficult? Your Majesty, it's better to take a look. Teeth are not a small matter. It would be inappropriate if it affects your appetite in the future, the doctor advised. The Empress frowned and hesitated for a long time before opening her mouth slightly. The doctor didn't dare to get too close. He looked outside for a long time but couldn't figure out what was going on. Your Majesty, I am incompetent. The doctor apologized and took a few steps back. Another doctor came up. After the 3 doctors examined the Empress, none of them found anything wrong with her teeth. Finally, he prescribed some sedative, pain-relieving medicine for the Empress, and asked someone to brew it for her to consume. The medical skills of this world were very impressive in other aspects, such as the black mud cream. However, the medical skills of this world were very backward when it came to dentistry. In fact, it wasn't just this world. It was the same in ancient times on Earth. Many celebrities suffered from diseased teeth. Some were tied to the teeth with ropes, and then the other end was tied to the arrow. After pulling the bow, whoosh, the arrow flew out, and the teeth were gone. Or tie one end to the tooth and the other to the door. He opened and closed the door. Whoosh! His teeth were gone. It looked simple, but in fact it was very risky, and it could easily lead to other problems. For example, when Jiao, a famous general from the Eastern Jin Kingdom, had a tooth disease and went to have it extracted. As a result, he suffered a stroke and died in less than 10 days. Therefore, many people used the waiting treatment method. For example, they waited for the tooth to fall out, or they got used to the pain. Lu Yu, a poet from the Southern Song dynasty, wrote in his diary while waiting. It seems like a disease, but it's not. My arm is broken, but it's hard to keep my teeth when they fall. Diseased teeth, it seems like a tooth is going to fall out. One tooth is on the verge of falling out, and my eyes are blurry. Old Tan, it seems like another tooth is going to fall out. Teeth fall but don't chew, feet are lame but can still walk. Against the wine, it doesn't matter if it falls out. It's not like it can't be eaten. A child with broken teeth can endure mockery. Today's rotten rice can be eaten with a spoon. Miscellaneous poems on first return. Damn it, I really can't eat it anymore. From Lu Yu's diary, it could be seen that dental problems were very troublesome for the ancient people. After taking the medicine, the Empress couldn't help but start to eat sweets again. However, she had to stop after a while. Although there was pain-relieving medicine, after eating sweets, she started to feel unbearable pain. Not being able to eat sweets made the Empress feel a little depressed. She even stopped watching television and lay on the couch in a daze. Tossing and turning could be described as the Empress's current state. Your Majesty, follow me to Earth in 2 days' time. The dentists on Earth are more experienced. After all, everyone has their own specialties. We have dentists who specialize in dentistry. Runbachian looked at the Empress and couldn't help but say. The Empress remained silent. At this moment, she finally realized the seriousness of the matter. Not being able to eat sweets made her feel more conflicted than if Great Xia attacked. Seeing the Empress remain silent, Runbachian knew that she had acquiesced. Move the candy tree away in a while, Runbachian said. This was to prevent the Empress from wanting to eat the candy tree when she saw it. No way. The Empress sat up from the couch and glared at Runbachian. That candy tree had almost become her treasure. Whoever dared to touch that tree, she would teach them a lesson. Runbachian helplessly spread his hands when he saw the Empress looking at him covetously. 2 days later, Runbachian and the Empress returned to Earth again. The Empress changed her clothes and sat on the sofa with an ice cream in her hand. After taking 2 bites, she had no choice but to stop. In the past, she never felt uncomfortable eating cold food, but it was different this time. Your Majesty, let's go to the dentist. Runbachian changed his clothes and went downstairs. Both of them got into the car and Runbachian began to follow the route to the dentist's hospital that he found on the map on his phone. The Empress was still in low spirits. Even though the Empress didn't speak much, Runbachian could still sense whether she was in a normal mood or not. She will be fine after seeing the dentist, Runbachian comforted her. At the dentist's hospital, they registered and took their disposable tools. Runbachian and the Empress waited for a while before it was their turn. The dentist was a female doctor in her 30s. When she saw the Empress, her eyes flickered slightly. Do you have any medical records? No. What's the problem? The dentist asked casually. She has a toothache. It should be here. Runbachian pointed to his face and said, the Empress should be suffering from a toothache here. Is she sick or are you sick? Tell me yourself. What's the problem? Where does it hurt? The dentist said impatiently. Runbachian frowned. This doctor's attitude wasn't very friendly. Hurry up, there are still patients waiting behind. The dentist said unhappily. Heh. The Empress sneered and raised her eyebrows. It had been many years since she met someone who talked to her like this. Toothache was already irritating enough, but she still met someone who was so ignorant. Both of you look fine. Next. The dentist glanced at both of them and shifted her gaze behind them. Hee. Runbachian chuckled. He placed the gun on the table and pointed the muzzle at the female dentist. Violence couldn't solve all problems, but it could solve most of them. Runbachian deeply agreed with this saying. At the very least, he could make this damn dentist put away her ugly face. Pow! As the gun was placed on the table, the dentist's expression changed. Both of you better leave quickly. I'm going to call the police. The Empress turned her head and looked at Runbachian. Her eyes were filled with curiosity. There was only one meaning. Can I kill her? Runbachian cursed his bad luck. He didn't expect to meet such an ignorant doctor. Would it kill her to have a better attitude? Go ahead. You can call the police, Runbachian said indifferently. However, before he could finish his sentence, the Empress held the gun in her hand and pulled the trigger. She had seen Runbachian use this gun several times. It wasn't worth it for her to kill such a person. Runbachian's gun was just right. Why didn't it fire? After the Empress pulled the trigger, she looked at Runbachian suspiciously. She had seen Runbachian use this gun in the past. Runbachian was speechless. The safety is off. Renbaqian removed the safety and placed the gun back on the table. I'm sorry. What I said just now might have made you uncomfortable. There are too many patients and I was a little anxious. I apologize. The dentist was so scared that her face turned pale. She trembled as she spoke. Bang! The Empress fired a shot at her. A hole immediately appeared in the glass behind her, and the surrounding area was filled with cracks. So this is how you use it. The Empress suddenly understood. She aimed the gun at the dentist and fired. Bang! The people who were waiting to see the dentist were dumbfounded. Following which, they ran out one after another. As they ran, they shouted, "Murder!" No one expected to encounter such a thing while seeing a dentist. At this moment, the dentist was already paralyzed on the ground. The Empress's second shot grazed past her ear. This thing isn't easy to use. The Empress casually threw the gun to Renbaqian. Bang! Renbaqian grabbed the gun with one hand and cursed. He lowered his head and looked at his leg. Blood had dyed his pants red. The wound was very painful. It was so painful that he kept shaking his leg. Zixiao. Renbaqian wanted to say something but stopped. What's wrong with you? The Empress looked puzzled. She didn't know why Renbaqian shot her with a gun. She didn't understand guns at all. She didn't even have a concept of them, let alone knowing what misfire was. Chapter 411. The police arrived very quickly, but the people from the Messier 87 department arrived even faster. Mr. Ren. The person who arrived didn't look too good. Hey, you can't blame me for this. I have a bad temper and will get angry with anyone who provokes me. It's already good enough that this person is still alive. Renbaqian spread his hands. As he spoke, he got up and limped out. Yo, yo, yo. Renbaqian sounded like he was singing hip-hop. As he walked, he screamed and sucked in cold air. It hurt. The gunshot seemed to have hit a bone. He had never been a tough guy who would pretend to be fine even if he was shot. He wanted the whole world to know that he was suffering from a minor illness, let alone a gunshot wound. Only then did the person notice the gunshot wound on Renbaqian's body. Why did you hit yourself? The Empress saw that Renbaqian was in so much pain, and still couldn't understand why he had hit himself. Renbaqian was speechless and couldn't be bothered to explain. Soon after, the police arrived. However, the people from the Messier 87 department interceded and didn't do anything to Renbaqian. When the Messier 87 department understood the whole story, they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Such a small matter had caused such a commotion. Fortunately, nothing major had happened. The doctor didn't die, but she was a little frightened. This was considered a lesson for her. They didn't like this kind of doctor. No one wanted to meet such a doctor when they were sick. Renbaqian felt that he had suffered a loss. He had to treat the Empress's teeth. Others were fine, but he was shot. By the time Renbaqian went to a nearby hospital to take out the bullet and bandage it, the Messier 87 department had already found a dentist for the Empress. Not only did they find a dentist, but even Yang Sun personally rushed over along with several people from the laboratory. They were also very interested in some of the Empress's data. They usually didn't have the opportunity, but they definitely wouldn't miss such an opportunity. Even a strand of the Empress's hair was very valuable to them, not to mention her teeth, saliva, and blood. If they were lucky, they could get them all this time. However, they wouldn't say this in front of Renbaqian. Instead, they said that they were here to help the dentist. After all, the Empress's identity was special, and her situation was special as well. It would be easier for her to resolve any problems that might arise. This time there weren't any accidents. After an old doctor took a look at the Empress's teeth, he smiled and said in a relaxed manner, "She has grown wisdom teeth. They usually grow between the ages of 16 to 25. However, there are some who have grown wisdom teeth beyond this age, so it's not a big deal. However, one of them is an impacted wisdom tooth. Its growth has been blocked by other teeth, causing some inflammation. It is recommended that it be removed." No way. The Water Empress rejected him without hesitation. Her phoenix eyes were wide open. She would chop off the head of anyone who dared to pull out her teeth. I'm afraid you won't be able to eat sweets anytime soon, Rinpoche said unhurriedly. The Empress. She hated this sentence from him the most. It's best to listen to the doctor. Wisdom teeth are useless, and if they grow crooked, it will affect the other teeth. Just think about those white rabbits. They are still waiting for you, Rinpoche said softly as he held her hand. Are her other teeth okay? Rinpoche asked. After all, the Empress loved to eat sweets so much. He was really afraid that one day, the Empress would get cavities. Even though the Empress was so strong that even the tip of a knife couldn't hurt her body, it was hard to say when it came to things like bacteria and viruses. There isn't any problem with her other teeth, the doctor said. Rinpoche then felt relieved. Now you only have two choices. Either you pull it out and eat whatever you want, or you don't pull it out and you have to endure the pain. Furthermore, you can't eat sweets, and I'm afraid you can't eat anything that's too cold or too hot either. You have to choose between temporary pain or permanent pain, Rinpoche said to the Empress. The Empress looked extremely conflicted. After a long time, she endured the pain and nodded her head slightly. The extent of her nodding was very small. If one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't be able to tell. Get ready to help her pull it out. Rinpoche saw her expression and decided to strike while the iron was hot. He didn't have any psychological burden regarding the matter of the wisdom teeth being pulled out. No matter what, it was better than the Empress being depressed for the past 2 days and being unhappy with everything she ate. The biggest problem now was that the Empress had already nodded her head, but could the teeth be pulled out or not? Zixiao, she's here to treat your illness. If she offends you in any way, please don't slap her to death, Rinpoche whispered into the Empress's ear. Rinpoche whispered into the Empress's ear. He was afraid that the Empress would accidentally slap this old lady to death. When Rinpoche spoke, his breath blew into the Empress's ear, making it a little itchy. But now, her mind was filled with the matter of the tooth extraction, and she couldn't care about anything else. To her, the tooth extraction was more serious than the attack of Great Xia and the Yun nation on Dayo. All of you get out, the Empress said after a while. All of you get out, Rinpoche said to Yang Sun and the rest. They are my assistants in case anything happens. Yang Sun pointed at the other two and said, they have to get out too. Rinpoche didn't give them any face. And you? The Empress poked Rinpoche's waist with her finger. Half of his body was numb. The Empress didn't want anyone to see her when she pulled out the tooth. After Rinpoche got out, the door was closed from the inside. The Empress was lying on the bed in the room. She wasn't used to the light shining on her face. Relax, it's just a tooth extraction. The old lady laughed. She only knew that the person in front of her had a special identity. Otherwise, she wouldn't have looked for her. But no matter how special the person was, the tooth still had to be extracted. With her more than 40 years of experience, this was simply a small matter that could be solved in a few minutes. However, she met with trouble at the first step. What's this? The Empress looked at the syringe that the old lady brought over and asked. It's an anesthetic. It won't hurt after a while. The old dentist was in a relaxed mood as she pricked the syringe into the Empress's gums. She used force, continued to use force. Her forehead was sweating. What made her flabbergasted was that the syringe couldn't penetrate the Empress's gums at all. Crack. The syringe broke slightly. The old lady's hand trembled, and the broken syringe went straight down. It's over. The old dentist was alarmed. With such strength, she was afraid that the gums would be pierced through. However, what she didn't expect was that when she pricked the syringe, it didn't even pierce through the skin of the Empress's gums. The Empress squinted her eyes and raised her eyebrows. Her entire body was overflowing with murderous intent, and she resisted the urge to slap this person to death. Just by pricking her gums with such force, she should have been slapped to death even if she couldn't hurt herself. Sorry, the syringe broke. The old dentist wiped the sweat off her forehead. Before she could use a pair of forceps to remove the broken syringe from the Empress's mouth, the Empress spat it out and stuck it into the ceiling above. Following which, the old dentist tried her best, but she couldn't inject any anesthetic into the Empress's mouth. The Empress began to feel a little impatient. To her, Leaving her mouth open and letting others play with her teeth was extremely humiliating and damaging to her dignity as an empress. Furthermore, the other party took such a long time to do it. The old dentist had a strange look on her face. Who was this girl in front of her? Even the syringe couldn't penetrate her gums. They were like steel. Was she really human? She even doubted whether she could extract her teeth. She was frightened. After a long time, the dentist asked cautiously, "Let me see if I can extract your teeth without using anesthetic." She felt as if she had come into contact with something extraordinary. How was this person in front of her human? She was basically a monster in human skin. Forget it. Tell me the location and I'll do it myself. The Empress sat up from the bed. At this moment, she understood that this person probably couldn't extract her teeth. She was too weak and was like an ant. The dentist's expression became even more strange. The patient came to her, but she couldn't do anything about it. She even had to extract her own teeth. If this matter were to spread, her reputation would be ruined. However, she really couldn't extract this tooth. Now she actually hoped that the other party could extract it for her, and not make her do it. She didn't dare to do it anymore. Following which, under the guidance of the dentist, the Empress stuck her finger in, and found the wisdom tooth that had just emerged. She pinched her finger hard on the gums and pulled out the tooth. It was simple and crude, but the price to pay was disastrous. That part of the gums was almost crushed by her pinch, and her mouth was full of blood. However, she didn't care. Instead, she sized up the wisdom tooth in her hand, threw it into her mouth, and swallowed it. This was one of the toughest parts of her body. How could she throw it away so casually? The dentist's eyeballs were about to pop out when he saw the Empress's series of actions. She pulled out a tooth that was only showing its head with her bare hands. How did she do it? Even if it was her, she still needed to separate that tooth from the gums, loosen it, and pull it out. Rinpoche stood in front of the door when he heard the sound of the door opening. He saw the Empress walking out from behind the door. How is it? Have you extracted it? This was what Rinpoche was most worried about. He always felt that the Empress's tooth wasn't that easy to extract. However, he had no other choice but to give it a try. "Let's go," the Empress said. The blood in her mouth dyed her mouth even redder. She was also feeling a little down. She was very distressed about that tooth of hers. Why is there so much blood? Rinpoche was startled and his tone became somewhat unfriendly. His body was overflowing with murderous intent. After killing so many people in the other world, even though his murderous intent wasn't as strong as that of the Empress and some Aboriginal warriors, it was still much stronger than most people on Earth. The atmosphere outside the room froze in an instant. "It's all right. She can't extract it, so I did it myself," the Empress explained faintly, and walked out without looking back. She was still distressed about that tooth of hers. Oh, the murderous intent on Rinpoche's body dissipated. He put his hands in his pockets and followed behind the Empress unhurriedly. After he left, Yang Sun heaved a sigh of relief. Just now he was really afraid that something bad would happen. Soon after, a group of people hurriedly entered the room to inquire about the situation. When they found out that the other party's tooth couldn't even be pierced with a needle, and that the other party used her bare hands to extract that wisdom tooth, everyone was a little surprised. This kind of body was really too strong. With the Empress's speed and strength, they always thought that the Empress's physical strength was very strong. However, at this moment, they realized that it was actually much stronger than they thought. Everyone was in high spirits. The other party's physical strength also represented that an Earthling could reach such a level after training. However, the tooth and blood that they wanted to obtain were completely absent. Regardless of whether it was the tooth or the blood, they were all swallowed by the Empress, leaving nothing behind. "I want to eat ice cream." The Empress sat on the sofa and stared at the television intently. "Your Majesty, do you still feel any discomfort in your mouth?" This was the third day on Earth. "I'm fine. Bring me ice cream, I want jalets," the Empress reminded him. A moment later, the Empress held an ice cream in her hand and ate it in a few bites. "Bring a few more." "Another one. I want more." Rinpoche was speechless. There was a row of ice cream sticks on the coffee table. Are you trying to make up for the desserts that you haven't eaten for the past few days? However, he was finally able to confirm that the Empress was indeed fine. That evening, Renbachian returned to Dayo. Renbachian began to boil cotton candy while the others hung candies on the tree. The Empress held a pair of long scissors and stood under the tree with bright eyes, cutting the candies. Another week later, a group of people escorted the Empress's imperial carriage out of Lan City and headed straight for the south. In addition to the Empress, Renbachian, a large number of guards, more than 40 students from the academy, and a small number of officials from various departments. There was a majestic total of 400 to 500 people. Although they were here to resolve the issue in the south, there were still many other things to do. When the Empress went on patrol, all the pedestrians she saw along the way stopped and stood on both sides of the road to greet her. There wasn't much awe in their eyes but respect. The only regret they had was that they couldn't see the Empress's true appearance. At this moment, Renbachian and the Empress were sitting opposite each other in the imperial carriage. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were both standing behind the Empress. Renbachian looked at the two cards in the Empress's hand and pondered deeply. He looked at the expressions of the three people and continued to ponder. After a while, he drew a card from the Empress's hand and laughed. He placed the pair of queens on the ground. "Your Majesty, you lost again." Renbachian raised his eyebrows. The Empress glared, raised her eyebrows, and had an unfriendly look on her face. "Your Majesty, please close your eyes." Renbachian smiled. It was time to enjoy the benefits. He played with the Empress for the whole day. First, he would draw a card as a ghost. This way, both of them would draw the base number of cards. After drawing all the pairs, both of them would draw the remaining cards from each other's hand. The last person with the last card would lose. Up until now, this was Renbachian's 13th consecutive victory. The Empress snorted and closed her eyes unwillingly. Her face was slightly red. Renbachian's laughter made the Empress want to slap his head. Renbachian gently leaned toward the Empress. Looking at the Empress's heroic face, he felt a surge of passion in his heart. Such a scene was something that countless people dreamed of. Renbachian and the Empress's faces were getting closer and closer. The Empress could already feel the airflow brought about by Renbachian's breathing. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan turned their heads to look at both sides, as if they were looking for something. Renbachian's obnoxious laughter finally stopped. With a speed that was as fast as lightning, a note was pasted on the Empress's forehead. On the note was a crooked drawing of a turtle. Chapter 412. Actually, there were all kinds of opinions about the recent plot. Some people felt that it was okay, some people felt that it was very lame, and some people felt that it was very poisonous. To be honest, I was also a little affected. Sometimes, after writing a chapter, I would be in a good mood. After resting for a while, I would look at the chapter and the comment section. When I saw some people saying that this was not good or that was not good, I would immediately lose my mood and reconsider whether there was a problem with the plot or not. To be honest, this book was written in a relaxed style. First, I had to let my mood relax. Sometimes, when I was disturbed, I would be affected much more than when I was writing other types of novels. I wasn't even happy myself, so how could I write something that was happy? Although I really wanted everyone to like it, it was impossible. There would always be people who liked this kind of chapter and hated that kind of chapter. I couldn't satisfy everyone. So, in the future, I will not comment anymore. I will write my own, according to my own ideas. Whatever I write, everyone will read. If I can't read anymore, I can only say sorry. In addition, I have always wanted to update to 3 chapters. 2 chapters is really too little. I will try my best. By the way, some people said that what happened in the hospital in the previous chapter was unrealistic. In fact, it couldn't be more realistic. Perhaps some people hadn't encountered it before, but this kind of situation was really quite common. All kinds of impatience, deadpan faces, very harsh tone, all kinds of situations. It was not uncommon for people to think that they were better than others because of their work. Some people went to the hospital to see a doctor, and just said one sentence. The doctor did not look at anything else. While playing with his phone, he absent-mindedly asked you to do a bunch of messy tests. The patient quarreled with the doctor and almost beat him up. The doctor said that this was how he treated people, and that his medical skills were like this. This was what happened in our province's Class 3 Grade A hospital in 2017. The hospital was one of the best in the province. As for other kinds of things that happened in the various hospitals, there were too many. I have encountered it myself, and it was very annoying. So, I was lucky not to encounter it. Chapter 413. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. It had been 3 days, and Renbachian had won 67 times in a row. The Empress was plastered like a mummy, and her face was densely covered with small notes. Every time the Empress moved her head, the notes would rustle. Again. The Empress gritted her teeth. At first she was just playing, but now, Renbachian had no choice but to play. She didn't believe that she couldn't win even once. Your Majesty, a small gamble is good for the mood, a big one is harmful, and a strong one is destroyed. Renbachian laughed mischievously. It was quite fun to paste notes on the Empress's face, and see her gnashing her teeth in anger. After all, the Empress always had a cold face. Even though she was losing so much that her eyes were red, she still looked more human. Let the Empress win another 3 to 5 rounds. Renbachian pondered for a while, and estimated that it was about time. He could see that the Empress was almost at her limit. If he continued to play, he would be the unlucky one. He was able to win 67 times in a game that relied purely on luck. Besides good luck, it was also because Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan's expressions were too recognizable. They looked at one of the cards anxiously. Drawing the other card would definitely not go wrong. Every draw would be accurate. These two fellows didn't even know that they had betrayed the Empress. Oh yeah, good luck. Renbachian drew another card from the Empress's hand, put it on the ground and laughed. Your Majesty, it seems that your luck isn't good today. Why don't we play another day? Renbachian said with a smile. Now that the Empress's eyes were red, how could she play another day? However, she still had to show her attitude. Let's play another day then. The Empress's eyes were originally wide open. It was unknown what she thought of, but she suddenly changed her expression and said faintly, "Eh." Renbachian was slightly surprised. He didn't expect the Empress to stop just like that. After all, there were all kinds of people who were red-eyed after losing. Tie him up for me, the Empress said faintly. Your Majesty, what are you going to do? Renbachian was shocked. You want to run away after winning for 3 days? How can there be such a good thing? The Empress slapped Renbachian to the ground. Qing Yuan and Hong Yuan were gloating as they tied Renbachian up tightly. Is it fun? The Empress sat cross-legged in front of Renbachian, who was tied up like a dumpling. As she asked, she tore a piece of paper from her face and pasted it on his face. You've been winning happily these 2 days, haven't you? Your Majesty. Right? Your Majesty this, oh yeah. It's just a pet phrase. You want to run away after winning? I'm just asking casually. The Empress had a look of resentment on her face. Within a few minutes, Renbachian's face was plastered so tightly that his face couldn't be seen. Following which, she hung one end of the rope that was tied to Renbachian on the roof of the imperial chariot. With a tug, Renbachian was suspended in mid-air. Your Majesty, we can talk things out. Why don't you let me go first? Renbachian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Now that the Empress had pasted paper slips all over his face, he couldn't see anything. Even when he panted, the paper slips in front of his nose and mouth moved up and down. This was truly karma. When others lost, they wanted to win it back. But this fellow actually made a move to exact vengeance. This isn't how we play around. 4 days after leaving Lawn City, everyone arrived at the side of a large river. It was indeed a large river. The river was at least 5 kilometers wide, and they could only see the other side from afar. Feeling the water vapor and hearing the sound of the flowing river, Renbachian walked to the riverside cautiously. Previously, he was almost swallowed by the White Dragon River. He was in awe of the rivers in this world. Especially with such a large river. He didn't know what kind of creatures lived in it. Sure enough, when a guard went to the riverside to wash his face, water splashed everywhere. A crocodile that was more than 10 meters long emerged from the river and bit the guard. The huge size of the crocodile made it look very intimidating. When it opened its mouth, there was no doubt that it could easily tear a person into pieces. Boom! That guard smashed the crocodile's mouth, grabbed its upper jaw, and swung it into the air before smashing it hard on the ground. Following which, he pulled out his knife and threw it at the crocodile. This series of actions was very quick, and the others only glanced at it and didn't care. That guard also looked relaxed. To Renbaqian, this was a ferocious beast, but to them, it was just an ordinary creature. However, the next scene made the guard's face turn green. He saw that the crocodile turned around and quickly rushed into the river. It also understood that it had found the wrong prey. Ignoring its injuries, it just wanted to escape back into the river. My knife! That guard widened his eyes and cursed. He jumped over, grabbed the crocodile's tail, and swung it hard on the ground again. Bang! 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 That crocodile was swung around like a broken sack. After a few swings, it seemed like it was still alive. Let me remind you, your knife seems to be bent, Renbaqian said unhurriedly. That guard's movements immediately froze. He saw that the knife that was stuck in the crocodile's back had been completely deformed after being swung around. My knife? Has anyone eaten this thing before? Is it delicious? Renbaqian stood at the side and ignored the guard, who looked as if his own son had died. Instead, he was excited. He had heard of crocodile meat, but he had never eaten it before. The ingredients in this world were generally good, and this made him look forward to eating crocodile meat. It's alright, it's quite chewy, someone at the side said. Peel off the skin first, then roast it later. When everyone was having lunch, Renbaqian smelled the alluring aroma of the crocodile meat. He felt that his saliva was about to flow out. However, Renbaqian frowned. He had chewed a piece of crocodile meat until his cheeks were sore. It wasn't just chewy, he felt that he was chewing rubber products. Bah! Renbaqian spat out the crocodile meat. This thing was really not meant for humans. However, when he turned to look at the others, they only chewed a few times before swallowing the crocodile meat. Especially for the Empress, the crocodile meat was no different from tofu in her mouth. Just by looking at her eating movements, it made people feel that this meat must be tender and smooth. This was the difference brought about by the disparity in strength. Not only was it reflected in individual strength, but it was also reflected in various aspects of the body. Even in the range of eating, there was a huge difference. Sir Ren. A guard came to Renbaqian's side and revealed a shy smile. This kind of expression on the burly guard was like a burly man with chest hair, leg hair, and a full beard wearing a sailor skirt. It made people want to beat him up no matter how they looked at him. What's the matter? Renbaqian had an impression of this guard. He was also a guard from the palace, and was usually a man of few words. Renbaqian's main impression of this guard was that he had a mouthful of teeth that went in and out like a husky. No two teeth were in the same line. It's like this, I fancy a lady and want to marry her. That guard rubbed his hands and looked as if he was talking about something that was difficult to say. Then marry her. Renbaqian was puzzled. Why was he asking him? But she said to wait for her next life. Sir Run, can you teach me how to do it? That guard scratched his head. His shiny white scalp was falling like snow. If he was asked to chop someone, he naturally wouldn't say anything. However, in this aspect he was a little puzzled. After thinking about it, it was more reliable to ask Principal Run. No matter how he looked at it, he was an expert in this aspect. It could be seen from this that such a weak person could make Her Majesty fall in love with him. She has already decided to be with you in the next life. It's obvious that she is interested in you, Renbaqian said with an encouraging expression. Ah, is that so? That guard hurriedly asked. Of course. Then why didn't she agree? Maybe she has some difficulties that are hard to say, Renbaqian said after thinking about it. This reason was really not easy to find. For example, she is seriously ill and doesn't have long to live. This kind of thing happens often. Some women get seriously ill because they eat too much kimchi, or something happens to their family, and they can't be together with the person they love. As a result, they can only make a promise to be with him in the next life. From this point of view, she is a very strong woman. However, which woman doesn't want someone to share her worries and difficulties when she meets with trouble? Therefore, since you already know her feelings for you, you must not give up. No matter what excuses she comes up with in the future, it's just because she doesn't want to trouble you and wants you to give up on your own. However, in her heart, you will definitely have a place for yourself and she has expectations of you. No matter how strong a woman is, even if she has already said so, everyone wants to be abandoned. After Runbachian's guidance, that guard became spirited. He was prepared to go back and carefully investigate the problem that the lady had encountered. After solving the problem, he would be able to win the heart of the beauty. Chapter 4:14. This river was called the 19 Rivers because it had a total of 19 bends. Other than the source, the narrowest part of the river was a few kilometers wide, and the widest part was hundreds of kilometers wide. After walking west along the 19 rivers for a day, they finally arrived at their first destination. The canning factory, the hydraulic forging workshop, the blast furnace, the new cement factory, and the glass factory were all in this area. After all, this place was rich in hydraulic resources. Moreover, 3 days after disembarking from the boat, they would then head north for another 4 to 5 days to reach the protectorate of the northeast, and 3 days south to reach the protectorate of the southeast. If they continued to follow the river, they would eventually pass through the Chun nation and enter the sea. Apart from having to be careful of all kinds of strange things in the water, this was a good place. If they could open a north-south canal in the future, they would be able to reach Lan City or even further north. If they were to head south, they would be able to reach the southern region. Then this place would really be amazing. Looking at the map, this plan was completely achievable. The premise was that Dayo's maps, which were miles away from the real world, were reliable. In 8 to 10 years, this place might be like the Pudong New District. At worst, it would be like the Xiong, a new district. Before they arrived at the canning factory, they could see some people fishing along the riverbank. Their fishing method was very unique. A group of people squatted at the edge of the water dozens of meters apart. They cut their fingers and stuck them into the water, while holding a barbed spear in their other hand. Every once in a while, someone could be seen retracting his hand at lightning speed and stabbing the spear into the water. When the spear was pulled back, a big fish that weighed dozens of kilograms could be seen struggling on it. The next step was easy. First, they tore off a piece of meat from the fish, put it into the water, and waited with the spear. Along the way, Runbachian saw at least thousands of people doing this. From time to time, he could even see a crocodile being stabbed into the water with a spear. The aquatic resources in this river were too rich. With such a simple and crude method, one person could catch at least a few hundred kilograms of fish in a day. After a large number of large carnivorous fish were killed in one place, large carnivorous fish from other places would quickly fill up the gap. After countless years of accumulation, this river seemed to contain endless resources. Runbachian and the Empress stood by the river and watched for a while. The two figures stood side by side while the others waited at a distance. "This is the treasury," Runbachian said as he pointed at the rippling river in front of him. It was a pity that Dayo had not made good use of it. The food produced by this river alone could feed hundreds of thousands of people, without any pressure. This was mainly because the people of Dayo didn't like to eat fish because of the fish bones. To the people of Dayo who were used to eating meat, it was a very troublesome matter. However, using the pressure cooker to make canned food was a good choice. When the production increased, it could be put on the market. In the future, we can open up 2 canals to connect the north and south. Regardless of whether it's transportation or traveling, we can save a lot of manpower and material resources. Runbachian told the Empress about his fantasies. As for the manpower to open the canal, it was naturally the Yun nation. At present, he had already found several new jobs for the people of the Yun nation, including building roads, opening canals, and mining. Let's not talk about the treasure vault first. From what I know, the new barracks have a lot of resentment towards you, the Empress said as she looked at the river. Why? Renbachian was puzzled. He did not have any dealings with the new barracks. They have already been eating fish for 2 months. They joined the army to eat meat, not to eat fish. The Empress felt that it was a little funny. There were 2 batches of 40,000 new recruits in the new barracks. If one had to choose one person that they hated the most, it would definitely be Renbachian. Just because of one of his ideas, they had been eating fish for 2 months. They could still accept eating fish occasionally, but now they had to eat these things every day. It was imaginable how heavy their resentment was. At present, the new barracks could be said to be full of complaints. Renbachian spread his hands. This was something that couldn't be helped. After all, Dayo wasn't rich in food. It was already good enough to have something to eat. Those refugees who were affected by the war in the north were still eating grass. Those refugees who were affected by the war in the north returned to their villages to see their fields that were in a complete mess. The livestock farming in the north was slightly worse than the livestock farming in the south. Most of the time, they would sell the vegetables produced in the fields at the market to supplement part of their meat. And those crops that were planted in the fields were destroyed. They could only dig wild vegetables, and a small amount of meat to barely fill their stomachs. Even though they wouldn't starve to death, they wouldn't be full either. In their words, they were eating grass. However, it was still better than eating soil. It would take at least a few months for them to recover to their pre-war state. Next, the group of people first arrived at the canning factory. The so-called canning factory wasn't big. It only had a few big sheds and 1,000 people. There were piles of firewood everywhere in the courtyard, and a large amount of waste from the fish. From afar, one could see the smoke rising from the canning factory. It seemed that the fire was going on 24/7. The fish caught from the river were stewed and stuffed into glass jars that were as tall as a person. Then, the jars were covered with animal skins and sent to the new barracks that was half a day's journey away. And when they got closer, they could smell an extremely strong fishy smell. A few hundred meters away from the high-temperature cooking area was the place where the waste from the fish was stored. A large number of fly-like creatures were in this area. When people walked around, they would be startled by a dense black mass. Seeing such a situation, Renbachian's eyebrows knitted together. Dirty, messy, and poor. It made people nauseous. Could the food made in this way be eaten? Is this how you make food for the recruits to eat? Renbachian frowned and questioned the person in charge of the canning factory who came to welcome them. That person looked at the Empress, and then at Renbachian with a strange look on his face. Yes. Are you willing to eat it? Renbachian asked. I eat this every day. That person still didn't know what Renbachian was trying to say. Renbachian looked at that person's innocent face, and was so angry that he didn't know what to say. This is for the mouth. Can't the food be cleaner? Let's not talk about being dustless, at least make it cleaner, Renbachian said bitterly. Sir, we will do as you say. That person finally reacted. Even though he felt that Renbachian was making a big fuss over a minor issue. The people of this era had a completely different standard of hygiene from modern people. Just like how third brother wiped his butt with his left hand and ate with his right hand, most people in this country couldn't accept it. Renbachian and the others stayed here for 3 days. Renbachian formulated a complete set of hygiene rules, including that everyone had to wash their hands before touching the ingredients, that the fish waste had to be dragged far away to be disposed of every day, and that they had to use vines to weave curtains around the sheds to prevent flies from entering. Although the things that Renbachian had requested weren't done when he left, he was already prepared to come back and take a look. After all, this was the first food processing factory in Dayo. It was necessary to set up hygiene rules, and everything would be handled according to them in the future. Next, everyone went to the hydraulic forging workshop. There was a row of wooden water wheels by the river. As the water wheel rotated, the bearings drove 2 giant hammers up and down, repeatedly smashing the iron plates below. The loud noise made it difficult for people to hear even if they shouted at a close distance. Your Majesty, this thing is too convenient. The blacksmiths can only swing a hammer that weighs 15 kilograms for an hour at most before they have to rest. This thing can be used 24 hours a day, driving 2 hammers that weigh 50 kilograms to strike continuously. 1 water wheel is equivalent to nearly 100 people. The official from the Ministry of Works who was in charge of the hydraulic forging workshop couldn't hide his joy as he said, "There were a total of 6 such water wheels here. And they were still in the process of being built." To them, this kind of hydraulic forging was a pioneering work, and its effect was enough to inspire people. You're tuning in to the Limei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.